all the rewards for himself. Thinking that he doesn't care, Sang Jin stays out, but if Mi leaves, he'll be in trouble. Looking to the side, the hero thinks that friend is a good word, but that he should be glad Keldian didn't come back with them. Because at this point, he'd probably be wandering alone in the indigo or purple zone and thinks that he can't stop here. He needs to get there as soon as possible. Cutting off the entire discussion, he says to think about it down below and that he wouldn't have said anything if the group was capable of fighting. Excited, Tay says he should have said that earlier and in his mind asserts that the sly guy must know something about what's down below and that only a fool would let an opportunity like this pass. Sometime later, the three are running for their lives. The girl says she warned them it would be dangerous and the blonde says whatever, he doesn't care anymore. Going back a little in time, they had just descended to the next floor. The group sees a giant snake, which is actually a monster from a completely different dimension. The three flee, and looking back, Ta can't believe the sly guy is going to fight alone, thinking he's crazy. Kang is facing the snake. Both are standing face to face. It's enormous and preparing its attack. At that moment, the protagonist also prepares. Hiding behind a pillar, he puts his hand over his ear because the snake is about to attack. As predicted, it releases a powerful red energy beam. It hits the front of the pillar. The beam destroys a large part of it. Analyzing the situation, Hansu expected this and endured it due to his magical resistance. His opponent has powerful shockwaves that use magic, in addition to scales tough enough that no sword can cut through. With a murderous aura, it watches, striking the pillar again, but this time with its tail. Dodging, the hero thinks that this isn't an easy opponent. However, he knows its weakness. Then he jumps toward the monster while holding a knife. Hitting the monster with a blade, he says he knows the scales are tough, but the space between them is more fragile. After landing the blow, the snake writhes in pain. Leaving the knife embedded in it, the hero steps back. After feeling the hit, the snake becomes even more enraged, slamming the ground with its hard tail, forcing Kang to dodge. From above, it observes its opponent, who must be only 10% of its size. Quickly, it launches another shockwave, while the protagonist just covers his ears. After that, he begins to open his eyes. Something is coming toward him. It's the snake's tail, which hits him with such force that it throws his body far away, causing the wall to crack. Leaning against the wall and all bruised, he says that it's finally reacting now. The snake is still furious from the hit it took. Where he is, it's a tutorial zone, so even with high physical resistance, he ends up being vulnerable to poison. Focused on the objective, he thinks he still has 5 blades left. With a murderous look, he prepares to attack. Jumping toward the giant monster, he tells them to have a little fun until it takes effect. Meanwhile, the girl hears some sound. Looking toward the corridor, she thinks they're pretty far away, but even so, the sounds echo all the way here. Frightened, she wonders if Hansu will be okay since he's all alone. Tae asks the girl why she stopped, saying they don't have any daggers and that's why they need to run back to the convenience store. Nervous about the situation, she just stays silent. Heading in the opposite direction, she says she needs to go check, but the boy calls her attention. Deeply irritated, the blonde thinks that everyone has been ignoring him since they arrived in this place. In response, he runs after her, saying he doesn't care. The three of them start running, heading back the way they came. When they get down there, Mi calls for Hansu, asking if he's okay. But she gets scared at what she sees. The snake is biting the protagonist's arm. He seems to be in trouble, and the girl screams his name. The three on the stairs watch the hero's situation. While his arm is being crushed, Kang thinks he stalled for too long. Then he grabs his small knife, attacking the snake's mouth. It reacts, screaming in pain, and at that moment, it releases Hansu's arm. He stands up in front of the monster. Seeing it tremble and writhe in even more agony, he thinks it was great because he managed to hit 3 spots, and that it left a nasty bite on his arm. Since he managed to recover his stamina, he'll heal soon. In the future, some races began to demonstrate increased resistance and healing abilities due to their evolved characteristics. Because of this, poisons would become ineffective. Additionally, using powers and other skills would be even more challenging. But in any case, the prior poisoning turned out to be offensive and effective, and he wouldn't have come this far without the paralysis venom. The snake is lying on the ground, practically defeated, and he thinks now everything is easier. In the background, his group arrives and the girl asks if he's okay. Walking toward him, he seems surprised that they are still there. A bit scared, the girl says she came because she was worried and asks how the hero's arm is. He responds that it's just a scratch and that it's already healing, so she doesn't need to worry. In shock, Ta can't believe that Kang defeated that giant snake alone. Paralyzed, he thinks he always knew the sly guy was strong and not that strong, wondering if he'll ever be able to catch up. Kneeling near the monster, Hansu looks confused. The girl asks if there's a problem. Holding the snake's shockwave rune, he thinks that this must be the reward because the monster is very powerful. Then he thinks it will be very useful if he has the magic rune, and that because of that, he can't activate this rune yet. With his arms crossed, the blonde says he's a little jealous, but Kang cuts him off, saying he's not going to use it. Knowing that he can only use 7 abilities, he understands it's impossible to maintain something like that. Intervening in the conversation, Sang Jin asks if he can use the rune, which surprises the blonde. Elbowing his companion, Tae says he won't be able to handle it, and that if the hero is going to pass it on to anyone, it should be to him. Nervous, the emo boy tells the bully that he already has one. Annoyed, he asks if it makes any sense for the emo to use it, since he was just hiding behind him a few minutes ago. Sang Jin responds that if he has something like that, he'll be even better than the blonde, and this irritates Ta, who says that he still hasn't taken enough beatings. Watching the two argue, Kang questions what they are doing. He explains that he's going to sell it, giving a 5% discount to whoever buys it now. Hearing this, they stop fighting. Tae asks if he can pay in installments, and Hansu replies that he can only if he has a guarantor, as that way they can help each other. Sometime later, he asks if they've decided. The girl says she will take it, and in his mind, the protagonist thinks that with the level of trust there is, it would only end up going to her. Besides, he noticed that the girl consumed a magic rune earlier and that she had nothing to hide, as it was a reward for defeating a monster. It's not uncommon because the more cards you have up your sleeve, the better, and he wonders if she has any survival instincts. Walking toward the hero, she says she has an agility rune, 3 sense runes, 7 strength runes, and 7 stamina runes. In response, the boy says he promised a 5% discount, so he will take only 6 strength runes. Happy, the girl says he's very fair. However, Kang tells her that if she gets into the habit of getting things for free in this place, one day she might end up dead. He concludes by saying that there's no such thing as a deal without a price in this world. Walking away, he thinks that from now on, he hopes they put in some effort. Walking near some crystals, he remembers that when there's a scaled snake, it means there's Zeuterium nearby. Seeing one of them, he says he's been lucky. Then he breaks off a piece of Zeuterium. From a distance, they think the hero is using his superpower again. The emo wonders if it's actually a hole puncher and a needle, while the girl thinks that despite its metallic appearance, it seems soft. Quickly, the protagonist steps away, piercing the snake's scales once again. Amazed, the two wonder what he plans to create this time, and in the background, Tae asks what they're doing. With the parts of the snake on the ground, someone in the group says it doesn't look very good. Tae asks if he's going to make poison again, and Kang explains that he's not. It's going to be something different, because although snake scales are very strong, they're not strong enough to be used as a weapon. So they need to be creative. This is the 11th tutorial out of 134 combinations of weapons that can be made using monsters and other things. The needle has a limited area of effect, so secondary damage like bleeding is harder to inflict. However, it helps you to identify the weaknesses of your enemies with more precision. And if you have enough confidence in your abilities to hit the exact point with the needle, the skill becomes perfect. With the needle being made, he mentions that the tip is a bit dull, but he made it with his own hands because he had no other choice. Quickly, he starts sharpening it with a knife. Happy, he says that it needs at least this level of energy. Considering the time alchemists take to refine their combinations, this is the best weapon that could be made in the beginning, stating that this is what needs to be done to break the defense of the monster that he needs to defeat to obtain the second hidden piece. After this whole process, he begins wrapping a cloth around the handle. Proudly, he affirms that this weapon finally seems usable. Then he says he could have created a stronger weapon, but with these materials, this was the best option he had. Tae is astonished by the protagonist's knowledge. Walking toward him, he asks if he would sell it and says he's willing to give all his runes for it. Thinking quickly, he knows the effort the sly guy put into creating it, and therefore, this weapon is worth more than his current one. However, Kang says that it's complicated to use this weapon and that he would sell it, but he can't make another one because he used up all the available material. Irritated, he thinks that the hero used everything for his own benefit in the end. Scratching his head, he thinks it's okay since there will be more good things ahead. However, this seems like the group's final destination. Since there's electricity and the subway is clean, besides, the hero seems too calm now for someone who's always ready for combat. Therefore, it doesn't seem like there will be more fights ahead, leaving only the option to enjoy the rewards. The three head to the train when Hansu questions why they're boarding. Tae asks what he means and Kang replies that only one person can fit here. He reiterates that only one person can board, so they need to get off. Sang Jin says he could be wrong, because it's very spacious, and asks how he knows it's made for just one person. Super irritated, Ta questions when it was decided that only he would board and asks why he feels entitled to do so, concluding that he only got to this place with the help of the group. At this moment, Kang turns to the three. Seeing his group, he thinks they're idiots, and although it's important to seize every opportunity, there's something they haven't realized. Responding, he says the blonde is right, and there's no rule stating that he has to go first. Striking his weapon on the ground, he asserts that there are no rules in this world. Giving them a chance, he says they can leave now or resolve this in a less friendly way. Pointing his weapon at the group, he says they can cry to their lawyer later and file a complaint. Smiling arrogantly, he says the decision is theirs. Afraid, the blonde just watches the weapon near his neck. The train starts moving and the three are left outside watching. Ted is irritated by what happened. Bothered, he wonders if he really meant what he said. Going back in time a little, he thinks that if the three attack together, they might have a chance, and if they win, he'll take Kang's weapons and runes. Preparing for combat, he thinks that if they lose, they can just apologize and Kang wouldn't kill them. However, Tae is startled by something, seeing the protagonist in front of him. With a very terrifying look, In his mind, he thinks that if he had moved even a little, he would have been killed quickly, affirming that the hero is capable of much more than that. Back in the present, he wonders how he could have frozen just from being stared at. The girl says they shouldn't have insisted so much, explaining that they got here because of him and they shouldn't have provoked him like that, saying that they should move on. However, the blonde thinks that's why they never get anywhere and that they should have used force. With a murderous aura, he asserts that the goal is to get stronger no matter what, certain that he's going to become stronger. Alone in the wagon, Kang reflects on the information he's gathered so far. The subway will make stops at 20 stations throughout the journey. At each station, it's possible to find a random artifact. Once you pass a station, there's no going back. The structure is designed to cause mental confusion, and even after reaching the end, there's no guarantee that the result will be good, so he needs to be cautious. Then he realizes he's already at the 12th station. So far, he's collected 8 weapons, including Laroon's crown, Kittle's claws, Obrang's metal glove, among others. These are weapons you can get by using one of the hidden pieces, and perhaps that's why they are of such great quality. Laroon's crown, combined with Sense stats, helps reveal the weaknesses of various monsters for a certain time. However, the protagonist can already visualize the weakness of all monsters, making this weapon useless to him. Having enough weapons, he hopes to find something different, like an object that increases his mobility. With that, he can move more swiftly during battles. Suddenly, Kang notices something. Stealing the random artifact from the station, he realizes it's the Manic Mist cigarette. Surprise, he didn't know this was one of the available items. When you place one of these in your mouth, the status of runes begins to increase, and the status grows as you keep smoking. If you finish the cigarette and inhale the smoke, the status of all runes increases by 20%, and the effect lasts 10 minutes. With the artifact in hand, Hansu feels excited. Holding the pack of cigarettes, he states that it's useless outside the beginner's zone, but for now, there's nothing better than this. Seeing this pack of cigarettes, memories surface. A blonde woman asks if he's smoking like before, and that the more he smokes, the older he looks. With long hair, the protagonist remains silent. He's looking at the woman, and both are wearing similar outfits. Continuing her scolding, she says cigarettes don't suit him, and that he'll ruin his pretty face if he keeps smoking. Back in the present, Kang says that this time it will be different. Sometime later, Hansu returns to the station where he was. Getting off the subway, he realizes his group has already left. Walking around, he thinks there are still 4 days left before the next hidden piece appears. So for 2 days, he has only 2 options. The first is to focus on hunting and collecting runes, and the second is to try to complete the available missions. Quickly, he asserts there's no reason to think twice. Looking at the pot, he says he completed some missions a while ago, but he doesn't know what items he'll get and that he needs to focus on the missions with the best rewards. Among the remaining missions, one has a good reward and a quick completion time. The reward is a sage's stone with a clumsy wizard as a follower. Its completion increases all stats by 10 and heals wounds that could be fatal. He concludes that this reward is impressive and extremely rare both during and after the tutorial. Then he remembers the origin of this crazy mission. Anvi Arin is a member of the Death Squad who was dragged to this place as a volunteer in a prison. From what he's heard, the people she trusted the most were always with her. However, as soon as it all started, she was betrayed and her fury awakened her powers. For 7 days, she mercilessly killed everyone in the place. After this event, she sought to end her own life, and thus the mission began. Remembering this, he thinks he should skip this mission as it conflicts with his goal of saving whoever he can. Knowing Meg is approaching, he decides to find the mission that takes the least time and realizes there is one. The reward is the selfish man's food pouch. So he decides to do that mission first. But before anything, he needs to make sure he has enough stamina and will focus on ensuring that tonight. Arriving at an empty diner, he wonders if he should eat first. Sometime after eating, he sees a hole in the ground, already knowing who made it. He says the moon will rise soon, and yet they had the audacity to do this. Excited, he decides to test their courage. Meanwhile, in the center of a city, some men are packing something. Watching from afar is the group from earlier, wondering how these people could steal everything. A girl complains that they were in such a hurry to flee that she couldn't save anything, questioning how they could steal everything, including from her. Nervous, Mi says her group might be strong, but there's a problem. The emo continues, saying they are many, and Hansu hasn't returned yet, so they shouldn't act rashly. 2 young people whisper that they've never heard the emo talk so much. Pensive, Mi can't believe they found the convenience store and thought she'd have more time. The group of thieves begins to hurry. Sun Ho is with them and waves at the youngsters. The group then notices the eye contact. The blonde asks if he just waved, and Tag explains that they're trying to provoke them. He says they don't need to respond and should just leave. Walking away, he says they need to find more supplies elsewhere. However, deep down, he's irritated, wondering why that guy waved since he's been doing a good job. Going back in time, Tad approached the group of thieves, saying that since they needed food, they should try the subway. Revealing himself as a traitor, the blonde says he'll show them the way to the subway so they can take everything. The plan is to make Hansu fight these guys for the food and ask for his help since there are too many of them. Sun Ho asks why he should trust him and says he must be plotting something with Hansu. The blonde grabs the guy by the shirt, telling him to follow him. Irritated, Sung questions if he doesn't know how much his brother helped him, but a fist comes close to his face. Ta ends up landing a hard punch on his face, throwing the man to the ground. With a frightening look, he says the three of them are weaklings, and he wouldn't trick them. Bleeding from the nose, the man just listens. He continues, telling them to think about it because it's an opportunity. Back in the present, the five are gathered in a house. The girl sees Hansu and calls out to him. Relieved, she thinks he just came back, and that alone makes her feel more at ease. Happy, the blonde thinks there's no way to know it was him, so there's no need to be nervous. Even if they find out it was him, he can just make up some story. Mihi says that when they were behind Jizin and Youngyu, the guys took everything from the store, and Kang says he already knows. Then he asks how much food they have left. She responds that they don't have much and that they tried to take as much as possible. Intervening in the conversation, Tae says it just happened, and now they can just steal everything back, saying that it'll be hard for Hansu to fight all of them alone. Kang replies that they should eat first. Irritated by the response, the blonde questions if he's mocking him. Slamming the table, he says it doesn't seem fair, asking the hero if he's not ashamed, because the group risked their lives for this food, so he should offer something of equal value. Then he presses, telling him to say something, and if he gives something good, he'll think about it. Nervous, the girl says they brought food for everyone, but he questions if they should just give it for free to the sly guy, because the group risked their lives for it, so they should charge. And that Hansu didn't lift a finger to help with it, and someone once said there shouldn't be charity. Hearing all this, Jizin and Youngyu remain silent. With a smile on his face, he thinks that if he brings everyone to his side, he'll get rid of this guy, wanting to see how long he'll act this way. However, the protagonist simply says it's a pity, because he can't give anything in return, and asks how they can make it work. The blonde says he must have plenty of stuff and asks him to share it with the group. In the background, the blonde girl asks what he's talking about. Tae replies that Kang entered his secret place and must have found something good there. Smiling, he says he should share it with the group since they're all going to be traveling together. Offering a cereal bar, he tells them to stop fighting over silly things. Hansu just observes his attitude. With his arms crossed, he responds that Ta has learned well, and Ta tells him not to change the subject. Standing up from the chair, he thinks the blonde wasn't subtle, but that makes sense since he sees the hero as an equal. But he thinks that's not the problem, and that he's not staying with them because he needs the group as their runes won't make a difference. As he walks away, the blonde asks where he's going. In his mind, Kang thinks he came because of errors and that he did what he could. Suddenly, he remembers how Kang Ta acts, and then he can't imagine himself saying that because it's too cringe. Leaving, he tells them to take care and stay in the shade. Seeing this, Meihi and Sang Jin get nervous. The blonde girl intervenes, saying they shouldn't fight and that they've made it this far without needing that. Looking back, she invites Meihi to bring Hansu back, but Ta says if the guy wants to leave, fine, and there's no reason to stop him. As he watches the hero walk away, he thinks that he remained arrogant until the end. He continues saying that if they give him something, the sly guy will come back and that they don't need him. Turning around, he asks Meihi what she's doing, asking if she's going to chase after that crazy guy. Approaching the protagonist, she says she's going with him and asks if she can come along. Nervous, she waits for his response. Answering, he says he can't take her with him. She says she understands that. However, Kang tells her once again that the decision to follow him is hers. This response makes the girl excited, but someone approaches from behind them. It's Todd, who says she still hasn't taken her runes from Sang Jin, and in his mind, he thinks he can't let her leave. Sang Jin speaks up, saying it's not a problem, because he's also decided to go with them. Surprised, the blonde puts a hand on his shoulder and asks if he's sure about what he just said. He questions if Sang thinks his father will go easy on his. He continues, saying he accepted the boy when he was nothing and asks if he's forgotten everything. Nervous, the emo asks what the blonde's father will do. He explains that they're stuck in this place and asks how he plans to tell his father. He concludes that none of this matters anymore, because there's no reason to keep listening to the bully like before. As Sang-jin walks away, the blonde is left in shock. Furious, he yells that they can go since the food is theirs anyway and questions if anything will change if they walk to another place. Consumed by rage, he says that in the end, they'll come crawling back. Sometime later, the trio walks through the empty streets. Sang-jin asks if they should have brought more food as they don't have much in their backpacks. The girl agrees while Kang observes a jacket. Putting on the new jacket, he asserts that it wouldn't have made sense. This statement leaves the two quite confused. Feeling great with the new jacket, he says they need to do something and that they should hurry. Nervous, the emo questions what this guy is thinking, because Hansu has the power to do whatever he wants, and if he causes trouble, it won't be worth it. At the same time, Kang affirms that he knows what he's thinking. However, he doesn't judge him since the emo knows nothing about the moon. Breaking the tension, the hero warns that it's almost midnight. Looking up, she asks what that means. Then she realizes something strange. Confused, she points and asks if something's wrong with the moon. The moon appears normal at first glance. However, a bizarre eye has formed within it. It's a giant eye that seems alien. In shock, the girl asks if the moon really opened its eye. Also frightened, Sang asks what's going on, because his food just turned into sand for no apparent reason. Worried, the girl checks her bag to see if it happened to all their food. Opening the bag, she realizes that everything they'd brought has turned to sand. Nervous, the emo asks about the glowing light he's seeing. Realizing it's people, he says that their hiding places are being exposed. The girl asks if they're glowing too, and the emo theorizes that they can't see who's nearby. But she's shocked to see humans glowing even through walls, understanding that they can now see where everyone is and that this basically forces them to fight each other. Sang then asks the group leader if he knew about this. Smiling, Kang says that even with superpowers, he didn't know about it. But the emo thinks the hero's reaction wasn't that of someone unaware. Humans are fighting, accusing each other of stealing their food, blaming one another, and even threatening to kill. Some demand others hand over all their food in a desperate act. Hearing all of this, Kang thinks that this world is truly horrible, and he explains that the reason he told them not to take everything is that as long as this moon, which only exists in this world, is above them, all the people's food will completely disappear. At that moment, Hansu begins to walk, and the emo asks where he's going. Responding, he says he needs to do what has to be done. Meanwhile, the other group is in shock as all their food has turned to sand. The blonde girl asks what they can do now and if they should search for more food somewhere else. Her companion says that they already taken all the food from the store, and the blonde thinks that the sly guy already knew this would happen. Irritated, he questions if the hero tricked him. Frightened, the blonde girl calls out to Ta-sung, telling him to look outside. In the center, several people are glowing. It's those bullies, and Sung-ho thinks Tai tricked him and starts looking for the bully. Watching through the window, the blonde thinks they don't stand a chance against this group. Suddenly, the girl says they should follow Hansu. Bringing her face closer, she questions if she really wants them to go back to the person who abandoned them. Shouting, she asks what they can do, saying that standing still won't solve anything. Continuing, she says that if they can't find them, they'll go after Hansu and offer their help that way. Her companion agrees, saying that this way they can make peace. Reluctantly, Tad thinks they're right, as a temporary alliance makes sense. Even though he doesn't like it, he sees this as a chance to make Kang owe him one. He then says they're right and they should help the group. Heading outside, he tells them to stay quiet and just follow him. However, something catches on his leg. It causes the bully to fall to the ground. Trying to remove it, he realizes this thing is stuck to his legs. Lying on the ground, he asks for help. Someone approaches, questioning if they'll be okay dragging the blonde along with them. Sung-ho's leader asks them to come closer, saying he needs to have a little chat. At that moment, the two begin to feel scared. Quickly, they both flee the scene, abandoning the blonde on the ground. Squatting down, the gang leader says Tai is still too young to speak that way. He then explains that this thing is called Oren's flypaper, saying that while Tao was making his plans, they were making theirs too. Standing up, he says that enough small talk. He then questions why only 3 members of the group are here and asks where the others are. Suddenly, he prepares to step on the bully, leaving Tao terrified by the situation. However, the man only stomped on the ground, and with his strength, he ended up breaking it. Trembling with fear, Ta-sung says he'll tell them everything, and that he knows where the others went. The bald man says he catches on quickly, but adds that someone else wants to have a word with him first, saying that they'll leave after this is settled. Sang-ho approaches, saying he won't feel satisfied until he gets his revenge. Irritated, the blonde thinks it could have been different if he hadn't been abandoned. With a maniacal expression, the man says they'll be gentle with the beating they're about to give. Several members of the group start kicking the bully, while he thinks about how he couldn't have been abandoned like this, saying that he'll kill the 2 of them. Elsewhere, the 2 are confused by something. A meal is being cooked in a pot. They both wonder how the 3 can be in this place, as if they're on a camping trip. Nervous, the girl thinks they should have known that the food would disappear. Approaching, she says she arrived just in time and tells them to eat together. After hearing this, the hero begins to stand up. In an instant, he makes a huge dent in the ground with his weapon. The girl is shocked. Chewing on food, he tells her not to cross that line. Irritated, she asks why he's being so childish and says it's Ta's fault. Curious, she asks what he'll do if they cross the line. Smiling, the boy says that based on his power, it won't end well for the 2 of them. The boy, who had been silent until now, says that the little power he has says many things. Responding sharply, Kang says yes, and that right now it will be dangerous with the 2 of them here. Looking back, they're surprised. The bald man's gang has already arrived. With an arrogant expression, the leader just watches. Kang and Mi stand still. The protagonist looks serious, while the girl is nervous. She doesn't know what the hero will do at this moment, but she's expecting something. This is the selfish glutton's meal. The conditions to obtain it are simple. First, you must cook and eat as much food as possible while the moon shines. This condition seems simple, but there's another one. You must be a selfish person, someone who doesn't share food with anyone in order to eat as much as possible alone, with the goal of being the only one to earn this reward. While everyone else scrambles for supplies and food in desperation, they must overcome all obstacles and consume the food savagely. Whoever created this mission clearly has a peculiar sense of humor. Even with all this, the person must remain calm. The protagonist is eating when someone approaches. It's Tae-sung, who's all beaten up and injured. The blonde girl asks if he's okay. Irritated, the bully curses at her, asking how she could abandon him. But she responds that they came to ask for help. Furious, he says that's a lie, and if she hadn't run away, he could have done something. Someone in the background tells him to calm down. Placing a hand on his shoulder, the man tells the rookie to relax a bit. The man then asks Hansu, acknowledging his skill, where he found that meat. Confused, Kang replies that there's meat everywhere and asks if the man doesn't actually know what meat is. The three look disgusted, wondering if he really ate that. In his mind, Kang notes that they've already tested this, and those who ate the meat are suffering from dehydration due to its toxicity. Yet the protagonist is eating it as if it were a regular steak. Curious, the man remarks that Kang must have figured out how to eat it safely, to which Kang responds that you just need to boil it in goblin blood. Surprised, the bald man pauses. Tad mentioned that Kang has superpowers, and that this superpower helped him secure a valuable item at the station. He considers that today might be the perfect day to fight him. Tay admits Kang might be skilled, but he has the disadvantage of being outnumbered and is just a 20-year-old kid. He might have experience fighting monsters, but that doesn't mean he'll be able to kill people. At that moment, Tad questions what the rookie is doing. He tells him to go eat and chat with his friend. Nervous, the blonde asks why he has to be friends with that sly guy, but Tad agrees it's best not to cause trouble in front of so many people. Suddenly, Hansu begins to stand up. Taz says the man has a point and suggests they have a talk. Worried, the girl yells for him not to cross that line. Continuing to approach, the blonde says she's just like that other girl. Wielding his weapon, the hero says it looks like it's going to go this way. Launching his strike toward the bully's ankle, he silently hopes Erez won't be mad at him. At that moment, Ted doesn't even know what's happening. Then he begins to fall to the ground. Lying on the ground, he starts questioning why. He begins screaming in pain, realizing he's missing one of his legs. At this moment, he yells, asking how Kang could do this and calls him crazy. His companions are horrified by the scene. Mi laments the situation while Tay continues cursing, furious that Kang did this just over a piece of meat. Watching this unfold, the emo can't believe it. Desperate, he says the group needs to think carefully because Kang will only get stronger and more dangerous. He says Kang will kill them all to take their runes. He concludes that they need to kill him now as they won't stand a chance if they wait. Nervous, the bald leader orders everyone to prepare. Sang-ho agrees, thinking that now is the best time to fight before Kang becomes more powerful. Confident, he knows the gang has their weapons, and with their bodies glowing under the moonlight, Kang won't be able to escape. In shock, he wonders how a college student could have that look in his eyes and questions what kind of life he's lived. Amidst all this, the hero simply watches. He remembers that Erez and Keldian used to argue even after joining forces. Erez would warn Hansu not to go around making enemies, but Keldian would insist that if an enemy was in front of him, he should crush them, because if he didn't, the enemy would come back to haunt him. Smiling, Kang thinks that both he and Erez agree with that philosophy. Then he raises his arm, showing 3 of his runes, thinking that if they're going to do this, they won't leave a single hair intact. The entire gang rushes toward him, shouting to finish him off. In response, Kang tightens his fist firmly. He prepares to attack now. Quickly, he uses such a powerful boost that the ground beneath him shatters. Charging toward the gang, he says he'll test the mission's reward on them. Frightened, Sang-ho wonders how Kang can move like that. The hero lands a precise blow on the man who thinks this is going to hurt. With the impact, he's sent flying. Quickly, the protagonist moves to another spot, defeating one person after another while the bald leader can only watch. Scared, he wonders if Kang managed to absorb all the runes he had. He then orders his men not to flee, saying they just need to use their advantage. Suddenly, the hero appears in front of him. Irritated, the man says he won't surrender. Walking toward him, Kang suggests he think carefully. Terrified, the bald man asks if Kang thinks he can live with the weight of killing someone. He insists that what Kang is doing is murder. He concludes that this isn't something a kid like him will be ready to handle. Ignoring the man, the hero gets closer. Charging forward with his weapon, Kang unleashes a series of strikes on the bald man, making him fall to the ground as Kang watches from above. With a sharp and cold gaze, he just stares at the man already lying on the ground. All the thugs lie on the ground, gravely injured. The blonde and her companion look on in horror at the scene. With his weapon still embedded in one of the men, Kang asks since they're here if it means they still want to fight. The two exchange fearful glances, deciding to flee without saying a word. After the battle, the protagonist heads toward his group. He resumes eating as if nothing happened. Chewing on the monster meat, he asks if anything happened and thinks to himself that he won't share the food. Awkwardly, Minnie says it's nothing. The 3 of them gather near the bodies of the gang members. The next day in the city, dawn is breaking, but the moon with the eye remains in the sky. However, it begins to close. Quickly, the eye of the moon shuts completely. As Kang walks, he thinks he's eaten enough to last nearly 3 days. He failed all the missions that involve people. But by obtaining this item, everything was a success, because it protects food from the moon's light and preserves it in a subspace where he can store anything. It can be used 5 times, providing food for almost 2 weeks. As they walk, no one speaks. However, the girl asks if everything is okay, saying that he didn't kill the thugs. The hero stops walking. Sighing, he says she's a scary woman. Irritated, she retorts that she's not, and that she was just worried about him. The girl thinks it's not surprising he didn't kill them since none of those men stood a chance against him. She figures there's no need to worry about the others, because Kang can become even stronger. Thoughtful, the protagonist realizes that Minnie has perfectly adapted to this place, and that he could too if his goal was simply to get stronger. However, he came back to the past with the aim of saving as many humans as he can, minimizing conflicts and uniting forces. With that in mind, the most important task of all is establishing the rules of this world. The first requirement for that is to not kill any humans to take their runes. Hansu could do that to use the few runes people have, but in doing so he wouldn't be able to balance the contribution. Even though it's difficult to enforce these rules now, it's more effective when established by someone powerful, affirming that a specific cleansing is necessary, but there are many people watching everything. However, that's not a concern because someone will stumble upon the runes at some point. Sang-jin speaks up, saying he's going to stop for now, and the girl asks what he means. Nervously, the boy says he doesn't think he can continue with them. Worried, she asks why now, and Kang says he can do whatever he wants, respecting individual choices. Turning his back after hearing the response, the emo starts to walk away. Hansu asks why he doesn't do what he truly wants to do. He approaches Minhee, asking if she's afraid of him. The girl is surprised by the question. Looking away, she thinks that she's afraid. However, she just needs to be careful not to cross any lines. Nervous, she stays silent. Suddenly, she responds that if she leaves now, she won't be able to return later, and affirms that she'll stay with him as long as she can. Kang watches her after hearing the response, his gaze cold. Faced with this, Minhee becomes very nervous. He thinks she has great intuition. Smiling, the hero says that if that's the case, they should move on. Sometime later, the two begin descending into some underground area. Meanwhile, at the old battlefield within the city, lying on the ground, Tag calls the men useless, saying they only know how to bark and that it would have been better if they had died. Then he says Kang Hansu made a mistake, because his minor wounds are already healing, and once he's fully healed, he'll kill them all and go after the protagonist. Crawling along the ground, he questions how they could have abandoned him, especially Minhee. But he stops crawling when he sees someone. It's Sang-jin, and Tao wonders why he's approaching now. However, he realizes this could be an opportunity. Excited, he asks Sang to help him up. The emo asks if Tai is talking to him, and irritated, the blonde asks if there's anyone else here and says they need to join forces, because this is also a chance for him to become stronger. In the background, the bald man mutters curses, and Tae says he's already at death's door. The blonde tells Sang to kill the bald guy first while the boy approaches a knife, grabbing it eagerly. Tae says he did a good job, and as for the runes from killing the bald man, he'll give half to the emo. However, the blonde asks why Sang is coming toward him, but Sang grabs the bully by the collar. In shock, Tae asks what he's doing. Then Tao wonders when Sang-jin became so strong. Holding the bully, the emo says he should have done this a long time ago. Desperate, the blonde begs him to let go, but Sang just stares at him with a murderous look. Quickly, Sang stabs him with a knife. Writhing in pain, Ta starts cursing the emo. Grabbing his shirt, he demands to know how Sang dared to do this. Sang responds that the bully always told him to know his place, and now the blonde should know his own place, because he is nothing when he's alone. He questions if it was fun all this time, using his father's name to spout nonsense. On the verge of collapse, Tae continues swearing in disbelief. With a terrifying expression, the emo begins to laugh. Then he drops the knife on the ground, but quickly, he starts vomiting. However, he thinks that he shouldn't grow weak over something as small as this, punching himself in the face while the blonde lies on the ground. Stealing the rune from his former companion, he thinks it's not meant for him. Quickly, he heads toward the bald man, who starts pleading, saying they can talk. If Sang lets him live, they can join forces. Sang keeps walking while the bald man says they can become stronger together. As he walks, the emo says he now understands why Hansu didn't come after him. Facing the bald man, who's begging for his life, Sang questions how pathetic he must have seemed to the hero, saying he doesn't want his protection, and that all he ever wanted was the courage to fight by his side. Because if he had decided to get stronger instead of cowering, he could have stood by his side. With 2 runes in hand, he thinks that if he hadn't been so weak, he wouldn't have been abandoned. That's why he hasn't changed since the past, when he used to shrink back walking on eggshells because of other people. But now it's different. Now he wants to prove his worth. With a cold gaze, he decides he will become stronger, aim to reach Hansu's level. And he thinks that if he uses these idiots to get to the same level, the hero himself will see him differently. Elsewhere in the city, a few black birds are flying. Suddenly, they attack Minhee. The girl starts to take a deep breath. Using her ability, she lets out a supersonic scream, causing the animals to fall from the sky. Looking back, she notices something coming. It's a giant bird, which is quickly sliced by Kang's blade. Without hesitation, the hero saves his teammate. Awkwardly, the girl says that in the end, she needed his help again. But he replies that being independent and doing everything alone are 2 very different things. Handing her part of the kill, he explains that if an ability has weaknesses, the least she can do is ask for help from a teammate, telling her to carefully weigh the pros and cons of each ability she has. Checking her stats, she understands it's now the 3rd day since they arrived here. Relieved, she thinks it was good to have bought abilities from Hansu that increase magic and stamina to keep up with him. But, regardless, she needs to learn not to depend on him. She sighs, frustrated with herself. Kang analyzes his stats and notices that his stamina is at 42. The best method is to keep attribute values balanced, and it wasn't hard to find what he needed because Minnie was lacking in both strength and stamina. Suddenly, the system contacts them, notifying them to return to the starting point immediately, and that anyone who's late will be punished. Surprised, the girl realizes it's a fairy, and in the background, the protagonist calls her to go. A while later, the two are walking. She can't stop watching Kang along the way. Curious, he asks if she has something to say and assures her there's no need to be afraid. Blushing, she says it's fine. Very nervous, she asks if he's dating anyone. Flustered, she wonders if she asks something too personal. In her mind, she tells herself she shouldn't think of him that way, but he seems too generous, so she can't afford to lose him. Fidgeting, she thinks she wants to ask something else, actually. With a disappointed expression, Kang thinks she seems a bit too strict, but isn't worried about saying these things. And that Kang Ta would have loved to get this question, even if it was just small talk. He recalls how the girl was trembling so much she couldn't even speak. Thinking of his beloved, he knows she's just someone he hasn't met yet, and he can't lose her again. He then responds that he doesn't remember. This answer makes her even more nervous. The two continue walking in silence. After a while, they arrive at a place where many people are gathered. Kang says he recognizes many of them, but the atmosphere feels strange. Suddenly, the little monster appears. Asking if all the travelers are present, it says that, unfortunately, they gathered too quickly. It then gets straight to the point and says it has two pieces of good news. With a maniacal smile, the demon begins to speak. The first news is that if they survive for more than 3 days, it will leave this place. Cheerfully, it asks if that isn't incredible news and urges everyone to celebrate. However, everyone remains silent. This leaves the demon feeling awkward, and it asks if the cat got their tongues. Quickly, everyone starts clapping, and the demon says it's good they're happy. Waving a finger, it announces that now it will introduce the star of the event. It points to the palace they see, saying that this place will be the most important part of the event. This is the magic altar. Seeing the building, the girl is surprised and questions the name altar. Continuing the explanation, the demon says there's a little creature inside, a very cute one that's waiting for everyone. Opening its arms wide, it asks if they see it. Introducing the little creature, it says this is the carnivorous beast, and they haven't fed it for an entire day, which shocks the people. Then it says the creature is dying to get out and play a little. With a sadistic grin, it explains that while the altar may seem amazing, it's weak and will soon break. If this little creature escapes, how many will survive? People look around, wondering if they'll have to face this monster if the altar breaks. Laughing, the demon says it's time for the second piece of good news. Lying on a pillow, it explains there's a way to make the beast sleep, and if it sleeps, it won't escape. Then it asks if anyone knows how to make it sleep, but everyone remains silent. Breaking the tension, it says these people are too boring. Changing its tone, it explains that the method is simple, and actually it's just 5 per day. Explaining that they just need to sacrifice 5 people per day. Everyone is in shock, and the demon continues, saying there are only 3 days left, so they just need to feed it 3 times. 60 people will remain, and if they do this, a quarter of them will become the creature's dinner. The little monster says it's a take it or leave it situation, and for those who struggle, it shows something. A hologram of another monster appears. People are fleeing from it. The massive creature continues to devour them relentlessly. Unbothered, the demon explains that these are images from another tutorial zone where people decided to fight. At this, people start saying they have no chance against that thing, and that they have only one option. Then someone raises their hand. Nervously, they ask how they're supposed to choose the people. The demon replies with another question, asking how he's supposed to know. He explains that they could use rock, paper, scissors, or fight it out. It doesn't matter, because they just need to stay alive. Showing a timer, the demon says they only have 1 hour to decide. After that, they'll be safe for a day, and then they'll have another hour to choose the next sacrifices. It concludes by saying it hopes they make the right choice. Panic spreads as everyone starts shouting that they're going to die. Minnie looks at the protagonist and asks what he thinks they should do. Closing his eyes, he responds that the damage is already done. That man from earlier speaks up, saying they need to be fair. He suggests drawing lots to select 5 people for the first day and then another 5 for the second. Smiling, someone asks why they should do that. Nervously, the man in the beanie looks behind him. The girl is surprised to see who it is. It's Sam Jin, who questions why they need to be fair. Someone asks what he means by that, and the boy repeats his statement. He's standing with the 2 people from before and questions again why they should be fair. The man says he can't do that when he doesn't even have a plan. Sang Jin asks who said he doesn't have a plan. Placing his hand on a post, he responds that his plan is simple. Instantly, he breaks the post using just his physical strength, startling many people around him. Revealing his plan, he says they'll start by finding the useless ones. With a frightening look, he says they'll sacrifice 5 useless people and asks what they think. The people around him are shocked. Looking at them, he thinks that everyone is focused on what he says, even though he only has one ability. Smiling, he thinks this is wonderful. He then says they can't overthink it, and that 100 people have already disappeared trying to fight the more experienced ones. He questions whether people understand that it will be difficult to do this alone. Perhaps everyone will have to fight as soon as they leave here, so they need to help each other. Looking at the man from before, he says they don't need useless people like him. Sang Jin, with a cold stare, asks if it's not obvious to sacrifice the weakest ones first. He then turns to Hansu and asks what he thinks of this plan. In his mind, Sang Jin reflects that he's not the same anymore and wonders if Hansu has noticed the change. He wants to help him, as he has no intention of being his enemy, because even in this hell, he believes he can start over. But to do that, he needs Kang's help. Sang Jin is certain that Hansu will agree with the idea, thinking it's the only option. However, Hansu responds that it's not a bad method, but then says he has another idea, and if they follow it, everyone can survive without sacrificing anyone. This shocks everyone, including Sang Jin. Nervous, Sang wonders what this idea could be. The man in the red beanie speaks up, saying it's impossible for everyone to fight together, and even if they have the numbers, there's no way to fight a monster that regenerates while devouring more people. Confused, the protagonist replies that no one said they had to fight. Frightened, the man asks what the plan is and if Hansu is planning to fight alone. Exuding confidence, Kang responds that yes, he will. This answer irritates the others. They question how he can fight that thing on his own. Suddenly, another man speaks up, saying they're not fighting goblins, and if they don't defeat it within an hour, they'll all die. Pointing at the timer, he mentions they now have less than an hour left. In the background, Sang Jin remains silent. In his mind, he thinks he would have caught up to Hansu by now. However, he's confronted with the protagonist's strength, which is already enough to face that giant monster. To his surprise, Hansu mentions that he plans to fight the monster, but says it's going to be difficult, making Sang think he's asking for help. Excited, Sang asks if Hansu is suggesting they fight together and that they can join forces. Annoyed, Kang says they never let him finish talking. This irritates Sang Jin, who becomes confused. He then asks what Hansu's suggestion is. At that moment, Minnie thinks he'll probably bring her along, but quickly realizes he would never do that. Finishing her thoughts, Kang says it's simple, explaining that if his strength and stamina increase by 30 each, he can fight the monster one-on-one. He then proposes something to the group if they give him their runes. Kang says he'll take responsibility and kill the monster. The people ask if only the ones chosen as sacrifices will give their runes and if it will be 60 runes in total. In his mind, Hansu calculates that with strength and stamina at 100, agility and perception at 50, and using a manic mist cigarette, it will be possible. Having spent his entire life fighting in this place, he assumes the numbers will be the same. And if he does this, he'll get what he wants. The second hidden item in the chaos, something even Keldian, Ares, and Kang Ta couldn't obtain. The one who discovered it was the monarch of Clementine's wrath. Even with the perfect personality to succeed, he nearly died trying. So even if someone wants the hidden item, they need to become the strongest possible. Breaking the silence, Hansu says it doesn't matter who gives the runes, and once he reaches the right numbers, he'll enter the altar immediately. He explains that delaying this won't help anyone. Nervous, the bald man says the weaklings will never have enough runes, and if they did, they'd be much stronger. Irritated, he demands the runes from the people and suggests they hold a lottery if they can't decide. However, someone calls him selfish, catching his attention, and he angrily asks what they said. A muscular man with long hair speaks up, saying the bald guy would be the first to be thrown on the altar if they were following the weakest first rule, questioning why they should give up their runes. He explains that the gap between the first and last place is huge. Staring down the bald man, he asks if the reason is that he has too few runes. Smiling, he says it's obvious the bald man is weak and would only try to run away. Irritated, the bald man demands to know who the muscular man thinks he is to talk to him like that. But the long-haired man warns him not to show his claws or he'll break every bone in his body. Frightened, the bald man asks if everything comes down to strength for him, saying that he can't even respect his elders. He then questions if they don't live in a democracy. As the muscular man approaches, he agrees, saying that's true, so they should vote. He tells the bald man to either hand over his runes and live another day or offer himself as a sacrifice, and that the vote will be secret, asking what the old man thinks. Kang steps closer to the bald man. Nervous, the older man says that Kang is strong and could easily take the runes from the muscular guy. He then suggests killing some of the stronger people, but before he can finish his sentence, someone punches him, asking if he wants to die. The man in the red beanie delivered the punch, and the old man responds that he doesn't want to die because he has a family. Then someone suggests throwing the old man in first because if the monster isn't satisfied, everyone will die. At that moment, Kang sighs, watching the chaos unfold. He thinks to himself that they never learned to retreat. Soon enough, they'll need to address this problem. As everyone argues and fights, Hansu calls for silence. Extending his hand, he explains the options they have. He tells them they have 5 options in total, and this is the ranking of the weakest here. In the background, someone exclaims that this is impossible. People shout, asking if Kang is suggesting they all sacrifice themselves. They curse at him while the hero simply smiles, exuding confidence. Time passes, and now less than 30 minutes remain before the event begins. Minnie stands alone in front of the altar, staring at it, unsure of what to do. Suddenly, Sang Jin appears, telling her that if she's going to act like this, she should go with him. He says Kang might allow her to join him. Blushing, she asks if he even knows how Hansu operates. The emo becomes frustrated with this response. The girl admits she wanted to go with Hansu, yes, but she can't just follow him aimlessly. At that moment, Sang realizes that he would be left behind no matter what and asks if she'll wait for him. Quickly, the girl responds no, explaining that the hero would get mad at her if she did, and that it wouldn't be any different from the others who rely on others. Everyone is panicking and Kang questions what they were doing about the others who were busy elsewhere. Saying doesn't care if they were resting, but now they'll have to face the consequences. He explains that they weren't left behind because they were weak. It's their weakness that kept them from catching up. He asks if they really thought he'd pat everyone on the head and take care of them. Then he says that if they want to live, each of them must give him 2 runes. Kang tells Minhee that this is all he can offer and that she can repay the rest after hunting for 3 days. Extending his hand, he says they can make up for it. Back in the present, Minhee says that Hansu always keeps his word, so he'll handle everything himself. And because of that, she needs to hurry and wonders if she can still catch up to him. Sang tells her she could come with them, saying that the others would love to have her in the group. Smiling, the girl thanks him but says it's not the right time for that, promising to answer later. She starts to walk away from him. Watching her, the emo thinks he doesn't need to see her fighting to know that she's even stronger than before. Trembling with frustration, he says he needs to show something too because he's still not good enough. He needs to prove his worth. Suddenly, the muscular man calls out to him, saying they need to talk. With a deadpan expression, Sang asks what he wants. One of the men asks why Sang is so tense. The man explains that his subordinate is a bit shy and introduces himself as Park Sayal. Pointing behind him, he asks if Sang is the leader of that group and suggests they have a leader-to-leader chat. However, the emo questions this title, explaining that they're just friends and that the people follow him. Park says that that's what makes a leader and that Sang must be impressive, seeing how strong they've become, making Sang feel awkward. Park mentions that he noticed Sang knows that guy Hansu. Curious, Park says he'd like to ask a few questions about him. Reluctantly, the emo agrees to answer. Meanwhile, inside the altar, Kang notes that goblin venom won't work. He'll need paralysis venom instead. Using the wing cat beads, a small amount of his stamina is recovered during the buff. It's useful for something he found while hunting. He needs to use it before the battle begins. Descending the stairs, he thinks that his attributes aren't very balanced right now, but he has no choice. Because to fight this monster, he's still not close to being strong enough. Taking out the box, he says he'll smoke a lot of the Manic Mist cigarettes. He puts one in his mouth, realizing it's been a long time since he's felt this, and hoping he won't regret it. The protagonist starts smoking the Manic Mist cigarette. He's immensely powerful with this item and the 60 runes he collected earlier. With a focused look, he thinks that a rune worthy of this world has just been created, because when rune attributes exceed 100, the colors start to blend, causing the rune to undergo a transformation, starting from colorless to red, then orange, and finally yellow. Soon, his status numbers begin to shift, starting with a colorless rune. Even though the difference is small, from 99.9% in normal runes to 0.01% in colorless runes, the transformation has begun. As the battle unfolds, Kang realizes that the higher the level, the greater the difference in abilities. He knows this monster wouldn't normally appear in the first tutorial, so a colorless rune should be enough to handle it. With his weapon in hand, he states that the essence of a troll would be enough to crush this creature. He prepares to attack. Rushing forward, Kang mentions that only one person has succeeded in obtaining this hidden item so far. Since arriving in this hellish place, the first thing he noticed was that the more impossible something seems, the better the reward. Charging from above, the protagonist goes all out to strike the giant monster. Suddenly, some people begin to pass through the portal, entering the altar. Park, one of the other leaders, asks what Sang Jin is doing and tells him to hurry inside. Sang Jin begins to enter the altar as well. Smiling, the other leader asks if it wouldn't be better to bring his friends along too. Sang Jin responds that it would be. He then tells them to hurry up and help Hansu. In this world, there are racial skills. Monstrous races, like carnivorous beasts, are born with these skills. The carnivorous beasts use 2 specific racial abilities. Quickly, the monster tries to strike the protagonist, who manages to dodge. Focused, Kang anticipates the monster's next attack. The first racial skill of a carnivorous beast is fear. The monster charges at the hero with all its might. Its massive claw approaches him. However, he dodges the attack once again. Backing away from the beast, he realizes that it paralyzes its prey using fear and recovers stamina by consuming its victims. Sweating, Kang notes that the pattern remains the same, which reassures him, because after the carnivorous beast restores its stamina, if it manages to use the blood-draining swamp, it will drain the blood right out of the body. Interrupting his thoughts, the monster attacks again, smashing the ground. Reflective, the hero understands that he can't compete with raw strength. His needle will only make a tiny puncture. However, he knows of a more effective method. Looking at the giant, terrifying monster, he understands that the best strategy is to restrict its movements. The monster prepares to attack again. Quickly, Hansu dodges while thinking that he needs to pierce the monster's skin. Getting ready to strike, he aims to hit the median nerve and inject the venom. He successfully lands a powerful blow with his sword, striking directly at the monster's nerve. The beast lets out a deafening roar of pain. Kang thinks that this should be enough. Smiling, he says he'll wait until the monster can't move anymore. Only 12 minutes remain on the clock. The hero prepares to strike again, unleashing a series of magical slashes with his sword, but the monster blocks them. After the attack, Kang steps back. With a demonic gaze, the monster waits, full of rage. However, the protagonist remains calm, observing while smoking his special cigarette. What he's witnessing is the unique skill of fear. It's influenced by one's mental power and magical resistance. Compared to other monsters Kang has faced beyond this tutorial level, this creature is in the end just a joke. Confident, Hansu believes he can finish it off. Having developed keen senses from years of combat and experience, his survival instincts are sharp. The monster tries to attack, but Hansu effortlessly dodges again. When his former comrade Kang Ta spoke about combat being merely a matter of prediction, the hero laughed at him, but now he understands what he meant. He can predict the monster's next move. He knows where it will move and where it will strike, allowing him to dodge again. Even with this ability to anticipate the monster's attacks, it's still not easy. Hansu admits that without increasing his stamina and strength, he wouldn't have been able to attack and evade the monster. Either way, fighting inside the altar was the right decision, considering the amount of time left and the limited resources. The other group watches and realizes that the hero can't be underestimated. The long-haired man comments that he can't believe what he's seeing, while his leader laughs, saying Kang looks pretty relaxed. In the background, Sang Jin observes as the two discuss how it seems Kang didn't even need the runes, and they were likely extorted. Then the leader says they just need to stick to the plan, and his companion agrees, saying they should descend quietly. From afar, Sang Jin shouts, announcing that they've come to help. Surprised, the protagonist looks over. But Sang Jin keeps calling out, telling Hansu to wait a little longer. While in the background, Park asks what he's doing, placing a hand on Sang Jin's shoulder. Park reminds him they agree to descend quietly, and the emo replies that Hansu needed to know they were there. Nervously, Park warns him that if he keeps shouting, a monster will notice them. Extremely anxious, Park stammers, asking if Sang Jin hadn't thought of that. Turning away, he mutters that the emo is an idiot. Smiling, Sang Jin simply apologizes. Down below, Kang is impressed with how much the boy has changed. One of the men comments that there might be a setback because of that idiot. However, he assures it's nothing to worry about. He continues, saying that once they take care of the beast, they'll deal with the two of them. In his mind, he realizes that after watching the protagonist fight, he knows that Kang is dangerous. He's not just a regular human, he's a satisfied tiger, a monster only resting because it's content. Nervously, the man reflects that it's not just about strength, because he can't forget what he saw that day. He saw the hero fight against so many alone without hesitation. Upon further reflection, it seems like Kang actually enjoyed fighting. The man concludes that someone as dangerous as Kang cannot be allowed to roam free. Once they eliminate him along with the others, Mei will be under his control. Breaking the silence, the man orders his subordinate to go down and see what's happening. At this rate, there won't be anything left to worry about as the beast's movements are slowing down. Worried, Jin watches the group's conversation from a distance. Suddenly, he begins smiling to himself. Suspicious, the long-haired man comments that the idiot has gone quiet for a reason. However, something grabs everyone's attention. They feel the staircase trembling. Seeing an explosion above their heads, they shout that everything is going to collapse. Everyone starts falling in a panic. On the ground, the man wonders how it's possible that the stairs collapse out of nowhere. Thinking they've already been caught, he admits it's been exhausting. The beast is now standing right in front of the group, staring at them with a look of hatred. Moreover, the pressure on the first floor is entirely different from that of the upper floor. The group watches the monster in terror. Nervous, Park considers attempting a surprise attack, but wonders where Hansu is gone. Seeing the hero step out, the long-haired man questions what he's doing. Sweating in fear, the leader asks if the hero isn't supposed to help, saying that with the group's help, they could finish it quickly. For a brief moment, he wonders if the hero is about to give up. In response, Kang merely bites down on his cigarette. Looking at them with disdain, he says he would have helped, but the man messed everything up, and now the monster will recover all its stamina. Glaring at them, he thinks he barely managed to dodge the attacks because of the distraction. He affirms that this group won't be able to handle the situation. Holding the venom, he reflects that once the beast devours the group, it'll be difficult to find it again. He'll have to prepare for another attempt. Climbing the stairs, he tells the man to try handling it on his own if he wants. From below, the men shout, asking if he's really going to run away. In shock, the long-haired man comments that it seems like Kang forgot about his friend. Angry, he suggests using the emo as bait and asks where he is. Speaking up, the boy asks who they're looking for. Smiling menacingly, he says he thought everyone had fallen after the explosion. In his mind, the man realizes that this is why the boy had been so quiet and understands that he destroyed the staircase on purpose. Glaring with hatred, he vows to kill him. Mocking him, Jin tells him to go ahead and bets he won't have time for that, because the monster is salivating, waiting for them to freeze in fear. The monster, ravenous, salivates while observing the group. The man notices that the creature is enjoying the situation. But the leader says that if the beast recovers its stamina, the hero will be at a disadvantage. Extremely nervous, he yells that if the hero abandons them, things will only get worse for him. He thinks they need to cooperate with the hero in order to survive. Breaking expectations, the protagonist says they don't need to worry about the monster or the stairs and asks if they didn't come here to sacrifice themselves. Confused, the man doesn't understand what Kang means by this. The entire group starts trembling in fear. They remember what the little demon said about sacrificing 5 people per day, and that only 5 are needed daily to feed the monster. The creature's mouth is already dangerously close to everyone. Suddenly, the monster devours the entire group, while the hero watches from a distance, stating that he has paid his tribute to the spirit of sacrifice. Afterward, he begins walking back into the altar. Approaching the emo, Kang asks why he did it. Saying he knew about the plan to bring those people on purpose, he warns Jin to be careful with his words. But the boy simply responds that he finally understands. He then starts laughing like a madman. With a cold stare, he says that now he knows how to be useful. Changing his expression, he asks Hansu to use him. The protagonist stares at him coldly. Then Kang asks why he should do that, but the boy replies that it's because he knows Hansu has a different goal from the others, which leaves the hero in silence. The boy continues, saying that Hansu always sees beyond the surface and takes action without hesitation. Despite attacking everyone with overwhelming force, Jin observes that in the end, Hansu didn't kill any of them, even though it could hurt him later. Even when the altar appeared, no matter what the others said, Hansu could have easily taken them out with his strength, but he didn't. Jin admits he doesn't understand why Hansu isn't killing people. Nervously, he points out that anyone can see that this isn't the hero's true nature. Hansu remains silent, merely watching. Then Jin speaks again, asking Hansu to use him. He offers to dirty his hands in Hansu's place, and whoever trades places should either take Jin with them or at least let him follow. In response, Hansu laughs. Walking toward Jin, Hansu says he doesn't know. He mentions that how he dealt with things was complicated. Clenching his fist, Hansu admits that this time there was no other choice, and it was the only way to handle the others. Nervously, Jin insists that next time he won't let anything happen to Hansu. Shouting, he promises it will be different and begs for a chance. He explains that people will always try to get in Hansu's way because he stands out too much among them. So for people to manage on their own, Jin offers to meticulously take care of everyone who gets in the way. That way, Hansu can focus solely on his goal. Most importantly, Jin believes that as Hansu grows stronger, he can become stronger too by following him. In his mind, Jin worries that if Hansu reveals his true goal, he may stop following him. Hansu begins to turn his head, suspicious. He asks what Jin would do if circumstances forced him to stay behind, even if he agreed to the plan. Smiling, Hansu gives an example of Jin being left behind against his will. After this statement, there's a brief silence. Jin takes it as a sign and realizes something is off in the second tutorial. Then Jin says that if that happens, he will get stronger and find Kang again, hoping that when he does, Kang will accept him as his ally once more. As a response, Hansu laughs and tells him to go down. Shocked, Jin asks if Hansu is still rejecting him. Approaching him, Jin begs for one more chance, promising to make up for all his mistakes. Finishing his cigarette, Hansu drops it on the ground and stomps on it. Hansu tells Jin not to misunderstand. Then he tells Jin to meet him tomorrow at 1 in the afternoon. He explains that by then, the monster below won't be around. This response leaves Jin stunned. Continuing, Hansu instructs him to collect all the runes below because Hansu killed those 10 people, so Jin should take the runes. Walking away, Hansu tells him they'll see each other later. Jin remains silent. As Hansu departs, he thinks to himself that he's unsure if it was the right choice, but he knows that he will need Jin at some point. He recalls when Ares told him to return to the past to save all of humanity. She mentioned that there would be people who would stand in his way and that he needed someone to punish them, a justice enforcer. This enforcer would manage things in his place. It's an essential role not only for Alice, but for every monarch in their world. The monarchs don't dirty their own hands, instead someone else does it for them, helping the monarchs move closer to their goal. With his arms crossed, Hansu originally thought of choosing Eren for the role, but he's now considering giving Jin a chance, though he's uncertain how much he can trust him. He recalls that once the second tutorial begins, everyone will be forcibly scattered, and when that happens, Jin's mindset might change. However, he understands that with some runes and 8 offerings, having a useful enforcer might be worth it. Still, Hansu knows that if this fails, there will be nothing else to do, and for now, his focus is on obtaining the hidden piece, willing to do whatever it takes. He vows to finish things once and for all. He wonders what he needs to accomplish next. Looking at the conditions for the second hidden piece, Hansu realizes that it's simple. Before the carnivorous beast destroys the entire altar and emerges, he must defeat it once and for all. However, this condition seems designed to be nearly impossible to complete. Suddenly, a mysterious magical portal appears in the area. Upon entering the portal, the system notifies that the secret mission has been completed. Hansu approaches a magical object, wondering what he'll find next. As Kang looks at the magical object, he feels a surge of excitement. Placing his hands on it, he realizes that it's the Ring of Nirmaha, the symbol of the Vampire King. Perplexed, he remarks that he can't imagine how the Berserker monarch managed to obtain this. He affirms that this is why no one has been able to claim it before. This is Nirmaha's ring. There are several standards for categorizing the levels of an artifact, but the most important standard is its color. A common artifact can never be more valuable than one with a superior color, although of course there are exceptions. Just as a traveler gradually develops their rune, growth-type artifact,
Я не могу, но достану звезду. Я не могу, но я знаю, куда иду. Я не смогу, это слова неуверенности. Нет, ты не слушай, иди вдоль своей преданности. Преданность, 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 преданность. Я слушаю свое сердце, как оно бьется. Ему не имется, но кроме как смотреть в оконце, краше посмотреть.
Absorb the rune and change color as well. Among all of them, there is one item that stands out as the best to have, the numbered series. Specifically, number 9, Nirmaha's ring. This artifact is symbolic of Clemente. However, despite the name, numbered series doesn't imply that there is only one. In the past, Clemente was the only one to own this artifact. This is why it bears symbolic importance. Through the 8 authorities that originated from this artifact, countless people were torn apart. Kang can't believe he now holds such an artifact in his hands. Gripping the item, the protagonist smiles, acknowledging how valuable it is. Considering how difficult it was to obtain this artifact, he knew it wasn't just some random object that could be tossed aside. But he's still surprised to learn that it belongs to the numbered series. This is Nirmaha's ring, a colorless artifact. The system notifies him that it can unlock an authority. From what he knows, the ring of Nirmaha has a total of 8 authorities. However, being colorless, he can only unlock one authority. The system notifies him that the authority of destruction is available. Its ability is to deactivate individual traits and abilities, including passive ones and skills. However, to activate it, you must make direct contact with the opponent. Once the time limit is reached, the effect is automatically suspended. The protagonist thinks that the ability to nullify his enemy's powers at will is incredibly powerful. But to fully utilize this, at least one of his stats must match the colorless rune. Pondering this, he realizes he will need to acquire several magical runes from now on. Suddenly, he steps out of the portal. Outside the altar, Kang begins to walk. In the distance, the hero calls out his name. Amazed, Minnie said as she heard that Kang finally managed to slay the carnivorous beast. However, her excitement quickly turns to fear. A huge shadow begins to rise over the street. Time has completely run out, reaching its end. The group watches as the altar simply vanishes. Kang reminds Minhee that he had told her before. Smiling, he says he promised to take responsibility and eliminate the monster. Seeing this, Minhee blushes deeply. Embarrassed, she fixes her hair and nods. The emo, Jin, realizes that Kang really did succeed, and he feels validated in his trust in him. Hansu mentions that there should be some time before the next tutorial begins. He tells Minhee to start hunting. Nervously, she calls out to Kang. She says she wants to take a different path from his now. Minhee admits that she doesn't feel qualified to stay by his side at the moment. When she's around him, she tends to rely on him too much. Smiling, she says that fortunately, Jin offered to come with her. Confirming this, Jin happily states that she's welcome in the group and that everyone will like her. As she gazes at Kang, Minhee thinks it's a shame. But she believes that parting ways for now is the best option. Kang reflects that they would end up taking different paths anyway when the new tutorial starts. He understands that Minhee is only thinking from her perspective, and that's fine. So he tells her that it was a good decision. After his response, he begins to walk away and Minhee falls silent. But quickly, she calls out for him to wait. She promises that the next time they meet, she won't give up so easily. Smiling, she says that they'll see each other again. With that, Kang smiles, bidding farewell to both of them. He agrees that they will indeed meet again. He then calls for Jin's attention, remembering when the emo told Kang to take a chance on him. Kang says that if Jin is serious, the choice is his. With just that one sentence, Jin is overjoyed and filled with excitement. A week passes. The little demon has gathered all the survivors. He declares that they have waited long enough, announcing that the second tutorial is about to begin. Then, with a devilish smile, he comments that there are more people than he expected. With a snap of his fingers, he says it's time to change stages. Something starts glowing on the ground, surprising everyone as they try to figure out what it is. They realize that there's a light shining beneath their feet. A young girl clings tightly to her father in fear. Meanwhile, the hero Hansu remains calm, already knowing what is about to happen. He understands that the second tutorial has finally begun. In another location, the people have been teleported, confused and questioning where they are. The girl is terrified. The little demon, Diabolus, appears and asks if everyone is present. The system announces that before entering the tutorial, they need to adjust the number of people. One of the survivors, already nervous, demands to know what they mean by adjusting the number of people. The system clarifies that from now on, it must do one thing. They need to limit their room to 7 people total. The system reiterates that no room can have more than 7 people. Nervous, Diakolos realizes there are 8 people in their room. The system explains that each room has different scenarios, but the start should be the same across them. It asks the group to discuss the matter amongst themselves. One of the survivors thinks to himself that he had suspected their progress had been too easy up until now. He wonders what they should do next. Looking at Hansu's weapon, one man comments that it looks strange, like a needle. He questions if this guy is really Hansu, saying he hasn't seen Hansu's ability in action yet, but it must be impressive to witness. Then, a woman steps forward, suggesting that whoever is left behind should work together. She adds that, in any case, someone has to go. Smiling, she proposes that everyone introduce themselves and make a case for why they should stay. She encourages everyone to show their value as individuals. A confident man steps up, offering to go first. Arrogantly, he presents himself, sure that no one in this room could defeat him. He boasts that he's certainly not someone to be dismissed. Hansu, observing quietly, realizes that the man is using Art Q1. He understands that this is a unique ability that uses magic to enhance one's stats. It also allows the user to empower their weapon with magic, just as this man has done. Art Q1 is definitely a unique and useful skill. Despite this, Hansu knows the man's effectiveness is limited. Still, having a skill like this is better than nothing. The red-haired man continues, claiming that if skill importance is considered, he has the upper hand. Introducing himself as Kangmin, he reveals that he possesses the healing ability. With his arms crossed, another man introduces himself as a combat expert. Frightened, one of the survivors panics, saying they shouldn't kill anyone, pleading for an exception because they are a family. After this, the room falls into silence. The confident man turns to the woman who first suggested the idea of introductions and challenges her to lead by example. Blushing, the girl introduces herself as Jimin. She nervously announces that she'll now demonstrate her ability. The blonde-haired man, trembling, asks why she's getting so close to him. Seeing her approach with a menacing gaze, he warns her that she'll regret coming at him so boldly. Suddenly, something strikes him. Jimin uses her ability, stabbing the man in the back. Everyone in the room is shocked. Even the man with his family watches in horror. After defeating the blonde man, Jimin collects his runes, grinning and calling herself lucky. Embarrassed, she admits she wasn't sure she would get the rune but plans to take the skill. Smiling, she offers to split the remaining runes with the others. One of the survivors realizes she's completely unhinged and mentally notes that they need to be cautious around her. In the background, Hansu sighs, watching everything unfold. He reflects that, thanks to someone who didn't know how to handle a better ability, everything has become easier. He understands that the people who died in the past are now present, and thus the entire flow has changed. Smiling, Hansu knows things are progressing in an interesting direction. Suddenly, the little demon appears, commenting that this rune reached 7 people faster than the others. Now the demon says it's time for the explanation. He declares that he will first show them something. Unveiling a surreal landscape, he explains that this is the path of ascension. Their task is simple, he says. They must keep climbing this massive path for 3 months and reach the dormant volcano at the center of the 2nd floor. Once they pass this second tutorial, the whole world of adventures will open up to them. Wishing them the best, the demon vanishes. The group begins walking across the bridge with Hansu leading the way. Trying to lighten the mood, one of the men encourages everyone to stay together and get along. Watching the protagonist walk ahead of them, another man grows irritated, wondering what Hansu's deal is. Just then, one of the survivors notices something strange happening. As Kang looks back, he realizes the bridge is collapsing behind them. Without hesitation, the group begins running for their lives. After a frantic escape, they finally reach solid ground exhausted. The little demon appears, smirking, and asks if he forgot to mention that the lower part of the island collapses over time. He adds that the bridges fall apart even faster, so they should be careful. Frustrated, the group realizes this is something the demon should have said from the start. In the background, the combatant asks the hero where he's going. Annoyed, he curses Hansu, calling him antisocial. The crazy woman, Jimin, suggests they follow Hansu, saying that he seems confident and likely knows where to go. The entire group begins to trail behind Kang. They pass through a dense forest. After walking for hours, the combatant complains that they haven't found any bridges yet and demands to know where Hansu is leading them. He grumbles that they've been seeing the same things over and over with no clear destination. Frustrated, he asks how long they'll have to keep walking. Curious, he then notices Hansu eating something and asks what it is. Hansu replies that it's oak bark, which has an antidote effect against venom. Perplexed, the man asks why he would need that. Suddenly, a giant snake appears. Reacting quickly, Hansu grabs the man by the shirt and throws him to the ground, saving him from the snake's strike. His expression shifts as he realizes he's found what he was looking for. Startled and terrified, the man asks how Hansu knew about the attack. Using the same nonchalant tone, Hansu attributes it to his superpowers. Shocked, the man watches as the snake bites Hansu's arm. but Hansu quickly retaliates, attacking the snake while calling it stubborn. The creature, an adult runic serpent, has a temperament that changes based on the rune on its head. However, there's no consistent pattern to these changes, making its behavior unpredictable. Frustrated, the man realizes the snake's attacks leave no room for recovery. He recalls that someone named Hancho had mentioned a trick to defeating them, but at this rate, it's not working. Angry, he turns to the family hiding behind him, asking why they aren't helping and telling them to stop hiding behind him. The father nervously apologizes, saying he must protect his family above all else. This response infuriates the combatant even more. He grumbles that having a family has nothing to do with fighting and wonders if they're trying to get themselves killed. He then turns to the bespectacled mage, asking if he has any excuses since he has no family to protect. Adjusting his glasses with a sadistic smile, the mage replies that he can't risk getting hurt in battle. He explains that if he's injured, he won't be able to heal the others. Reacting to this, the combatant sarcastically asks if the mage's sword is just for show. But then he concedes that the logic makes sense since the mage is the team's healer. The mage smugly reminds the group that his healing comes at the cost of 3 strength runes. Hearing this, the combatant is left speechless. Shaina turns to the combatant, asking what he plans to do. Sad and frustrated, he walks through the grass, wondering if he's the only one who finds the situation unbearable. The bespectacled mage taunts him, urging him to charge ahead. Meanwhile, Hansu then calls someone using his technology. It's a person named Keel, who asks what he thinks of the new group. And the man responds to not even mention it, and asks how things are going over there. The person on the other line says it's not too bad, and that apparently there is someone from the rescue team from the next floor, saying that he needs to find recruits along the way to expand the group. So the man wonders who he can bring along to the group among all the available options, remembering Hansu, who claims to have superpowers. He also remembers Jimin, who is apparently crazy, in addition to the cunning Marin who wears glasses. And of course, there is still a family of useless people. So he says they must survive above all. He says they will talk later and says goodbye to the captain. Suspicious, the protagonist just watches the fighter and only says that it's too early for someone with monarch traits to have already manifested them, saying that part of the attributes of a person that all monarchs possess is the literal ability to lead a group. And to become a monarch, in fact, the monarch gives their clan members their own symbol. All who bear the monarch's symbol have their bond with others strengthened, making it possible for the clan to communicate among themselves. However, the number of people the monarch can assign to this group is limited, but for now, they will be busy trying to recruit more people. Thinking about this, if the protagonist wants to compete with the monarchs, he will have to start doing the same. Because to be heard, he needs to be strong enough to draw attention. Sometime later, all the lizards and rune snakes have been destroyed. Then he wonders if they have already left the area since the number of the dead is decreasing. The protagonist moves forward, understanding that they are almost at the nest of the mutant rune snake, and that they are finally close to the reason he is there. The mutant rune snake is much larger than the others and has a different scale. It is the rune-eating snake. The family man behind everyone asks for calm, wondering if he really needs to fight this giant snake or if it could just ignore them. But Hansu says that if he wants to leave for that reason, he can go, as he doesn't care either. The man says he doesn't know what to say and that they should walk as a group. Facing Kang, he says that the man got something wrong, affirming that he is not walking together with the group. Then he explains that they were just walking in the same direction, but it's already time for them to separate. The girl says there's nothing to do, and the man, desperate, asks who's going to fight like that. Smiling, Jimin says they can't force the boy to stay with the group, and asks if the man is going to back out as well. But this response also leaves him in shock. Then he says for them to continue. The fighter is curious about Kang's decision, thinking he understands that he heard the hero is stubborn, but he can't abandon him this way. The doctor asks him why he is standing still, saying that if he is thinking of bringing the boy to the group, he might as well forget it. Sighing, he responds that all this time he was the only one not healed by him, and that people like the hero don't listen to others. From what he analyzes, he's also not the type that will live for long. Hansu thinks it's a pity for such a talented person, but there's no other way. Fighting with the protagonist, the giant snake tries to strike him. Then he tries to dodge when the rune is active, but when he removes the agility rune, it attacks. Quickly, he charges at the creature, attacking it with his powerful meal, realizing that it is stronger and faster than the scaled snake he faced in the previous tutorial. However, it's nowhere near the carnivorous beast. Analyzing the fight, the hero understands that when he attacks the snake, it switches to the resistance rune, weakening the damage, understanding that if he takes more time, he won't be at a disadvantage. But it's going to be a hassle to deal with this situation, stating that defeating this creature will be simple, since he just needs to focus on the trees in the center of the clearing, which are shaped like a nest. So you must ignore the snake and first attack that place, because that way, instinctively, it will ignore its own defense to protect the nest. Running from the snake towards the nest, he understands that it works. However, he suddenly stops running, attacking the giant snake with multiple strikes with his needle. Happy, he says he got his hands on it faster than he imagined. The reward is the egg of the rune-eating snake. The egg is starting to hatch. In his hands, he holds the egg of the rune-eating snake and the rune he just took. The egg then begins to hatch more intensely, and some living being emerges from within it. It is a young rune-eating snake. It eats the runes and spits them out immediately. Curiously, this young snake eats 3 random runes and spits out 2 chosen by the owner. So you need to give it 3 to receive 2. Then he says that she can get all the runes she wants. But getting the runes he needs is much more important. Understanding that for now, he should focus on increasing his magical and physical resistance, telling the little snake that now she can rest. And with that, he has achieved his goal, having to soon leave this place. The child asks his father where they are going and he tells him not to make noise. Looking at the map, he realizes that it's not showing the structures in much detail, and that they can't move without thinking when they don't know who might be out there, wondering where they will be safe on this island. Irritated, he thinks about what would have happened if he hadn't been abandoned by the others. Your wife says she heard something coming from the bush. Trembling, he spreads his arms, questioning whether it's a monster or another person. But who emerges from the bush is Kang Hansu. He asks what the family is doing in this place. Nervous, the man asks if he was eating the monster he went to fight. Quickly, Kang responds that he killed the monster. In shock, the man questions if he really killed it, and then he came back with only a scratch, since it hasn't been that long since they separated. Then, the hero asks where the others from the group are. With that, the man starts telling the whole story. Going back a little in time, his family had been abandoned by the group. The man said it was very dangerous for them to separate, and that they shouldn't do it. But the commander sighed, estimating that the man's plan was just to relax while they did everything. Jimin agreed with the fighter, saying that they lost one of the best, and that it was annoying to take care of people like them. The doctor said he should stick with whoever was stronger. Irritated, the man remembers this and says they separated, and that they even blocked the path so they couldn't follow them. Muttering about how they are idiots and how they were despised, the family man asks Hansu where he is going, and the boy replies that they need to walk because they have already lost too much time. The wife tells her husband that they should also go. So the family begins to follow the protagonist. Turning around, he asks what they are doing. Nervous, the man says that the hero himself said he was never with them, and says that this family is just making their own way. Ignoring the response, he thinks he is very straightforward. Then he tells them to do as they please, because he will fight alone anyway. A little while later, he is already annihilating some wild monsters. Saying it's very difficult, but because of that, his attributes are getting better and better. After that, he puts his young little snake on the ground to grab the rune, and considers it a good decision to focus on increasing his resistances first before anything else. The snake is eating the life rune of the moment, humming. His attributes are rising a lot, especially his resistances. The hero stares at the knife, thinking about cooking something with the rest of the monsters. The daughter blushes and is very excited to see that Kang is getting stronger and that it's amazing. Then she wonders if they should also fight, but her father says there's no need for that and that just being together is already like a blessing from the gods. So they just need to find a safe place to stay. Then they decide to follow the protagonist. The 3 of them are running after him, trying to keep up. The girl wonders where he is going now. Then she notices he is entering a tunnel. He is moving forward, fully focused on the tunnel, while the family is also following him, but they are a little scared. Seeing other people along the tunnel, he wonders if this is where they were supposed to get all along. The man is very happy that they reached this place without any problems and for still being alive. And the family is also excited along with him. Noticing the arrival of the family, the man looks back and also sees that the protagonist has arrived. Seeing that he returned alive without any injuries, surprisingly, the little devil approaches the family man, saying that he is making a lot of noise even though he arrived late. Then he says he will close the door since they were the last to arrive. Closing the door at an instant, he scares the whole family. Snapping his fingers with a sadistic smile, he says the large-scale event will now begin, welcoming everyone to the first layer of the first floor. That 75 people remain, which is very good, pointing out that luckily they didn't have many casualties along the way. Then he says this event is special. It's a battle for tokens. A system screen appears for all participants. The little devil explains that they need to use the tokens to move, and that the goal is to get out of there from the collapsing first floor to go to another island. He also says it's obvious that some islands are full of monsters and surrounded by lava. But if they are lucky, they might end up on a central or southern island, which have many treasures. Excited, he says that everyone would want to go to these easier islands with treasures, but that way it wouldn't be fun, so there will be some rules. The capacity of the boats is only 3 people, and they need at least 3 tokens to board. However, if 3 people use 3 tokens, they will be randomly separated to different islands, whether on a central island or farther away. If 2 people use 3 tokens, they can go together, but they cannot choose their destination. However, if someone uses all 3 tokens, they can go wherever they want. Everyone is frightened, except our hero. Smiling, he talks about sympathy, and in his mind, he understands that she was the last one, and all who could have ascended are already gone, leaving only 1 boat. With the map in hand, he says that the islands farthest from the center are all collapsing, and that the difficulty of each island will vary greatly. Therefore, the more advantageous the position, the better. He says there are about 30 minutes left before the entire first floor collapses, and that they have a total of 25 boats scattered around the crater. With a very sadistic smile, he tells them to start and that they need to survive no matter how. Because this way, it's even more fun. Soon, chaos begins as people start shouting at each other to give up their tokens. Irritated, they start fighting, saying not to be left behind. Someone tells Hansu that this is the beginning of inevitable chaos, calling his name, which makes the hero look to the side. The family man kneels, begging for his help, pleading for him to help his family just this once. Desperate, the man explains that he needs more tokens to get to the central island without any trouble. With a frightened expression, he says that the protagonist is strong and quickly adds that he can get tokens or anything else he needs. Then he suggests that he steal tokens from other people to bring to the family. He only thinks that if the hero does this, they won't have any problems getting there in time. Putting his head on the ground, he says that he would be saving the lives of innocents. Coldly, Hank says that the man needs to take care of himself and solve his own problems. Kneeling, the man begs him to resolve the situation, pleading kindly while someone in the background tells him to be quiet. Approaching the man, Hanshul kicks him in the chest. Grabbing him by the shirt, he says that he is very annoying and asks if he will keep listening. Invitingly, he calls Kang Hansu to go with him and says that this way he might even get some tokens if he needs them. He explains that even after leaving the group, he doesn't like any of the members. Clenching his fist, he asks if Kang feels the same way, and since he's also strong, he can join those of the same level. Then he explains that this is a power his companion awakened, different from a skill, and if Kang agrees, he can obtain it too. The man says he already talked to the leader about him, and the leader agreed. Before he could finish speaking, the protagonist quickly refuses the invitation. Confused, the fighter doesn't understand anything. Explaining, he says they are not like those useless people, and that he doesn't understand the real value of having a clan. Persistently, the protagonist says he knows very well what it means to have a clan, remembering the bonds he had in the past with other people. But this time, he will not be subordinate to anyone, because this time he would end up distracted from his own goal. Hankyul then says there's no other option, throwing a token on the ground. He then explains that he stole the token from that pathetic man, concluding that it's a shame he refused, but that he also can't always do what he wants. Excited, he says he'll meet up with the others on the central island, so he can consider this an early gift. But in his thoughts, Kang says it's a useless effort because it doesn't matter at the moment. The blonde man approaches, saying there's a token under him, and another says that if he doesn't take it, it's up to him to grab it. Quickly, several people head toward the token on the ground. One ends up grabbing the token first, but they start fighting amongst themselves to see who will keep the token in the end. One of the men goes with a knife toward the girl's father, who begs not to be killed. The man with the knife grabs the girl by her coat, saying they're a family and that he'll give her a dignified death. Then everyone starts screaming in an endless chaos, thinking that this family was placed there to watch a show from the beginning, and that no matter how much effort they put into the situation they are in, even their death is planned in this place. Jimin catches the protagonist's attention, asking why he refused Hanshul's offer earlier. He responds that he has other reasons and asks why she wants to know. With a scary smile, she says she also has a proposal for the hero, showing that she belongs to a clan and tells him to come with her. He starts nodding his head, saying no, and she smiles, saying that was expected. However, she says that before leaving, she has one more question, asking if he hasn't left yet because of the sense of empathy. Then she says she doesn't think that's his type. She begins staring at the hero, who ends up staring back at the girl. And no one will know what happened down here because those who stayed won't even be able to protect themselves. In his mind, he thinks that all of these people are ones he could have saved at some point. However, in the tutorial, where the fairy's power is immense, he won't be able to save everyone, so he only has one thing left to do. Gripping his weapon, he apologizes to everyone around him, thinking that he knows very well the fate of those who cannot move on to the next island, down below where the sea of poison lies, while the fairy seemed to enjoy watching all the people melt one after another. He could only watch all of this without being able to do anything. So he says people can hate him as much as they want. In his mind, he thinks that instead of suffering while being exploited by them until death, he is being merciful in his own way. Sometime later, he is feeling the breeze inside the boat. The devil says that he is truly incredible, that he didn't expect him to do that, but regrets the fact that it was too easy. Laughing a lot, he says that Kang is a rising star and doesn't need to worry because he won't go gossiping about it. With a sadistic smile, he says he will be waiting for him up ahead. Reflectively, Kang thinks that he won't regret it and that he didn't come back to save everyone, but to win as quickly as possible. He cannot falter, affirming that he must keep moving forward. His next goal is the Central Island. The system notifies that all 1921 travelers who arrived are very welcome to the land of opportunities, known as the Central Island. There are a total of 3 important things on the Central Island. The first is to defend the castle that holds the crystal. The second is to grow stronger through the underground dungeon, the only dungeon in this region. And the last is that the monster wave is coming, so you need to protect yourself. The archers are trying to destroy the undead wielding swords in a fierce battle between them all. If they can hold the wave here, they will survive during the day, so they must stand firm. One of the men is on the ground, saying he can't do it and hopes to survive another month while begging for help. Another shouts at him to maintain the defense line. Slamming his hand on the table, someone says they need to establish some rules, explaining that the defense was almost broken in just one day, and that's why they suffered serious losses. This is Park Jung-wook, MK of the Monarch clan, who says that if things continue like this, they will fail to protect the crystal. And Ju-yeon, from the Huizhong Monarch clan, says they should discuss this matter when the other monarchs arrive. Hong Xia from the Noam Monarch clan comments that the most powerful are already in this place, so it doesn't matter. This is Lee Duktae from the Smog Monarch clan, who asks what they suggest doing. Park says the biggest problem is the lack of strength and defense, and that they need to bring people who are not affiliated with the clan, even by force if necessary. Xia says they have no way to control the unaffiliated travelers, but Park reiterates that they need to deal with them even using force, because a new attack is coming, and they have no guarantee they will be able to hold it off this time. Then the red hair asks if the clan alliance did any recruiting, and that by combining their forces with the outsiders, they could guarantee they would defend themselves. However, the man says they need to consider the number of people going to the underground dungeons because it's a serious problem, since this caused them to grow in numbers, and now they almost have the same number of members as the clan alliance. These gathered people formed a ridiculous group calling themselves the Basement Alliance, and when they started taking action, they were already beyond the control of the clan alliance. So he asks how the clan alliance, a group focused on defense, could deal with these people, suggesting that they send the Force Line clan to the front to the dungeon first. One of the monarchs intervenes, saying that if this is the plan, the smaller clans should go ahead to minimize losses. Biting her finger, the purple-clad monarch says that if at least the original 1900 had focused on defense, at first everyone participated in defense because everyone's survival depended on it. However, some people started returning from the dungeon with powerful artifacts and became stronger. Soon, everyone on defense began going to the dungeons one by one. Then she wonders how they will be able to defend the crystal for the next month, and someone arrives in the background. Arriving all smiles and happy, Jimin says she's not here to pick a fight this time and mentions she brings important news. She mentions she received a report that someone is going mad and fighting against the Basement Alliance. This information leaves her colleague in shock. Everyone is surprised by what the girl said. Meanwhile, outside, someone is kneeling on the ground, begging for mercy. Quickly, a sharp weapon approaches. It is the protagonist's needle, striking the man's shoulder with full force. With a cigarette in his mouth, Hansu says he's free to go and that starting tomorrow, everyone will fight at the top. Trembling with fear, the man begs him not to come any closer. The man lying on the ground is in shock, realizing he cannot win against the hero, while Kang says he needs his weapon. In the background, a doctor is watching everything, realizing it's Kang Hansu. One of the men grabs a knife and runs toward the hero. Staring coldly, Kang says that the artifact he's holding is too good for someone without color. Striking him in the chest, he says that's what he deserves. Trembling with the knife in his hand, the bald man wonders if the knife's ability has disappeared because it's not penetrating. In response, Hansu says that now it's his turn. He strikes the bald man with full force. Then the hero states that it's tiring to fight him while trying not to kill him, and that it's inevitable because in the end he's a valuable resource. Smirking sarcastically, he says there's only one more, but that should be enough. The clan alliance quickly arrives at the scene, shocked, wondering who this person is. In their minds, they understand this is the boy Hansu had mentioned. With his arms crossed, Kang says that the Basement Clan and the Clan Alliance will unite starting tomorrow, alternating between hunting and defense. And if anyone has a different opinion, they should speak up. Then he explains that people cannot be commanded without this characteristic anyway. At this point, he asks him to gather as many useful people as possible and have them join his clan. He assures that the people outside will follow all his commands. However, one of the clan leaders realizes that this will only benefit the hero, not them. She wonders what he truly wants. Monarch Lee looks at the girl, questioning what she wants as well. Smiling, the monarch says that someone like the hero who just arrived and is already causing trouble must have some hidden interest behind it. Hansu responds that as long as the basic system rules are set, he has no intention of interfering. However, Lee says that you never know, he might simply change his mind and get rid of the clan alliance at some point. Still, Kang says he's not interested in these debates, but if that's a concern, quickly, the hero disappears from the scene, leaving everyone in the room in shock at his disappearance. Grabbing his sword, the man says it's just a simple invisibility skill and that there's no way the boy left that place. However, Hansu responds that he could have attacked if he wanted. appearing behind the arrogant monarch, placing a knife close to his neck. The man realizes that it wasn't just a simple trick, but rather a dragon that was confusing his senses. Nervously, the man can't believe he fell for something like this so easily. Then the boy says he got a new item before coming here to join the current trend. Guards quickly arrive at the hall, but Kang says he has no intention of being hostile toward them, telling everyone to do their best according to their positions, stating that's all he wants, nothing more. As he leaves the hall, he thinks that they've all been against each other the whole time, and it will be difficult to unite their forces, but there's still time to go easy on them. Then he thinks that this is just the beginning, and that something else is coming next.
На море, я сегодня смотрю на море, Сколько разных историй залило это море. No babe, no scroll me, тебе не надо быть so much скромной. Посмотри на это море, обрати взгляд на этом взоре. Это облако похоже на сердце, что-то вроде. Если ты хотела отложить что-то попозже, сделай прямо сейчас, вообще нисколько позже. Ты такая красивая, I feeling sorry.
Standing in front of him, Jimin asks the protagonist to wait, saying she will be disappointed if he simply leaves. Jimin refers to the conversation they had earlier and says she now expects a different answer. She asks the protagonist what he thinks about it. She reiterates that she has already asked this question before and wonders if he knows how to join her clan. Standing in front of the protagonist, the girl starts to stare. Approaching him, she says that this time she expects a more honest answer. Getting closer, she asks what he thinks and questions whether he doesn't feel lonely traveling alone or if he has someone in mind to accompany him. She explains that she heard he was with a girl named Mi at the station. Observing the protagonist, she understands that he's unresponsive, so she can consider that a no. Being overly friendly, she says it's all good, and that it would be great if they could join her clan. Ignoring her, he starts walking, leaving the girl in complete shock, unable to believe what she's seeing. She says he couldn't even pretend to be listening. Then she curses under her breath as he sighs and walks away. Park's clan is organizing everything after the battle, instructing them to gather the bodies and saying they need more supplies. They mention that people with support skills are also important. Arriving at the scene, someone calls for the surgeon, saying the southern wall is also secure. He responds that's great, and that the wounded should head in that direction while the rest can rest. The man says they managed to keep a consistent defense and that none of the positions were understaffed. However, he reveals that those who joined initially were uncooperative, but in the end, everything worked out. Concluding that thanks to them, they didn't suffer as much damage. The commander states that given their situation, they can't afford to slack off. With that monster guarding the defense line, they had no other option. And it's shocking to see the hero handling so many monsters at once. If this person had a bit more education, they could be recruited by the clan. He thinks that regardless if they continue as they are, they'll be able to handle the opening of the rifts. Suddenly, someone screams that a rift appeared in the sky. Soon, the usual little demon appears. All excited, he asks if they were waiting for him. He asks if they had enough rest over the past 2 days. Park's clan is in shock, realizing the demon's presence can only mean something bad. The demon explains that it looks like they're ready to put real action into practice for the people who are bored. And starting today, demons will appear on the battlefield. Additionally, these demons are very powerful, but the people shouldn't worry too much. He explains that the undead they had been facing up until now didn't drop any rewards. However, by killing a demon, many crystals will drop. The creature says this is a great opportunity for everyone there, because they can exchange these crystals for some incredible artifacts that are exclusive to this location's shop. Moreover, they can also exchange the crystals for something else, which are tickets to escape the current location. He questions whether they want to escape as quickly as possible. Talking in parallel, 2 men understand that by using the crystals, they can escape, and up to 5 people can leave together. The demon concludes, saying they better start collecting crystals. Suddenly, a red portal opens in the sky. A monstrous claw begins to emerge from the portal. It's a giant monster with red eyes and teeth. He's a hulking monster who starts laughing frenetically on his arrival. People scream that he's coming their way. The monster begins walking with a hateful glare. Everyone is terrified, saying someone needs to go forward to see what the monster is like. Quickly, someone bursts into the middle of the crowd, yelling for them to step back. It's the protagonist who leaps high, heading straight for the new demon in the tutorial. He attacks using his new sword infused with magic, but the monster manages to block with one hand. With his free hand, the monster begins to create some sort of power to strike. However, swiftly the protagonist dodges the attack. Then he says it's to be expected of a demon, even if it's a more degraded version. Excited, he mentions that he can't land a critical hit with normal attacks, and that his mist cigarette is also finished. So he needs to enhance his existence defense with the rune-eating snake. However, he realizes his attack power is not enough to defeat it. For now, he will need to make good use of the artifacts he obtained in the dungeon, using the rogue's lightweight boots, which increase the user's movement speed for a total of 1 minute. Deciding to attack it with speed, wearing the boots, he quickly charges toward the monster and jumps behind it. Apparently, the demon won't be able to react in time. However, reflexively, the demon manages to defend anyway. Kang starts landing several consecutive strikes, but all are blocked by the creature. He is extremely serious in this battle because he cannot afford to be defeated. Without losing his composure, he manages to land a direct hit on the torso. This enrages the demon even more, who unleashes a black shockwave. Anticipating the attack, the hero defends himself using his sword. After that, he is thrown to the ground, causing an explosion with the full impact. With no other choice, he opts to use the power of the Nirmire Ring. This is the power of destruction, which automatically neutralizes any ability upon contact. On the bridge, everyone watches as the protagonist faces the demon alone. The sergeant of Park's clan wonders how strong he has become, and his leader says they need to be ready to seize this opportunity. He asks if the leader wants them to attack, and the captain says that if they don't, others will take their place. Quickly, they all rush down to chase after the monster. While watching the fight, Jimmy asks her leader if they should help the protagonist. But Shia, in turn, says she prefers to wait for now. The woman states that she wants to see Kang's capabilities at the moment. Meanwhile, he is battling the demon. Several people are surrounding him. Mockingly, he thinks about how shameless these people are, and that the demon could use its racial ability at any moment. He cannot afford to be distracted by the people around him. The demon is at least 5 times the size of the protagonist, yet he remains unfazed, wondering why the demon hasn't used its ability yet. Demons have vastly different racial abilities depending on the individual, making them unpredictable. So he questions why the demon hasn't used its racial ability up to this point, wondering if it's a creature that utilizes area attacks. Suddenly, the demon begins to build up its attack. Kang yells for everyone to back off because they cannot handle this demon. The medic says he has a bad feeling about this and asks if they should retreat for now. But his colleague says they need to stay close to land the final blow. With a demonic smile, the monster prepares to attack. Using its racial ability Infernal World, it smashes the ground and causes fire to erupt. In the background, a random person with a glowing shield says that these flames are no match for his new artifact. Obsessed, he says he only needs to land the final blow and the rewards will be all his. However, many flames rise around him. Everyone starts running. They all flee as the man with the shield is killed by the flames. Though everyone is running away at the same time, Kang stands still, waiting for the attack. He begins to activate the ability of his ring, saying that he will try to use the full power of the artifact right now. Attacking the flames directly, he uses his authority destruction ability with his sword. Then people are in shock, wondering if the flames were extinguished just by the hero's attack. The strike was strong enough to crack the ground. People remark that he's a tough one. In his mind, the protagonist states that he is the only person who can fight the demon, because he's the only one who can match this power. Suddenly, the monster charges at him. The two of them are fighting, engulfed in flames. In the background, the red-haired clan leader watches, wondering if the person he's seeing is truly a traveler like all of them, because surely they started off as equals. However, the power gap between them is enormous. He points out that they need some kind of plan, because if things continue this way, the clan alliance will lose all the advantages they gained so far. Sometime later, people are already preparing for the next wave. The girl is leaning against the wall alone. Someone approaches, saying that she's waiting for a certain person. She better forget it. Confused by the comment, she asks what he means. It's the fighter, explaining that it's useless to wait because he also waited every day in vain. Changing the subject, she asks who he was waiting for, and he replies that he was waiting for Kang Hansu. Shifting the conversation again, he asks if she's also following the orders of the monarch. With a frightening look, he says that the clan alliance has been very fragile lately and asks if she wants to know the reason. Staring back at him, the girl asks why he's talking about this. Then he asks if it isn't obvious. Suddenly, the man turns to the other side, and she asks what's wrong with him. The fighter says he felt like they were being watched, wondering right now if he's imagining things. Inside a hall, Monarch Lee is observing the two and says it's been some time since Kang Hansu started monopolizing the demons, but he hasn't done anything strange so far. His colleague says they placed several members of the clan to monitor the hero. The girl explains that besides defending, hunting demons, and visiting the underground dungeon, Kang Hansu hardly rests. Then she adds that those who haven't yet chosen a clan are constantly fighting with the clan members. The monarch says that's expected since someone like him doesn't have a clan either. In other words, it's more natural for problems to arise because even the clan alliance follows Kang Hansu's orders. Some people begin to enter the hall while the man explains that he's prepared something for this. Smiling, he says that for the sake of their future plans, this cannot continue. Several people begin gathering with everyone in the hall. With open arms, he asks if they can start discussing the future of the clan alliance. Elsewhere, a monster lies dead with two of the protagonist's weapons stuck in it. Kang Hansu appears tired after many battles. Throwing his needle to the ground, he says it's useless at this point. Sweating profusely and exhausted, he says that with this, the total is 60. and you can finally get the top-tier artifacts sold in the crystal shop, because most of these artifacts are exclusive to clans and have great effects. However, if the crystals fall into the hands of the clans, it will definitely lead to disputes. So he needs to nip this in the bud now. Observing, he says he has another, larger objective as well. Then the system notifies the exchange of 60 crystals. He comments that he can use most weapons, but it's better to use those he's already more familiar with. So he decides to purchase the weapon Judgment of Dekratos. Excited, he says this weapon will make his fights much easier from now on. Spinning the chain with the scythe, Kang Hansu is very pleased. He wonders why not test the weapon now. Quickly, several undead rise from the ground, and he prepares to fight. Eager, he thinks that only 10 days remain until the end of the defense battle, and he's very curious to see who will take the initiative with the remaining time they have. 10 days have passed. With a menacing smile, the demon says that this time the travelers will certainly keep things interesting here. He states they prepared a grand event for those who can survive the longest. Many people are shouting, demanding to know what's happening since the next monster wave hasn't started yet. Several monsters were killed during these days. Suddenly, another monster appears. Multiple demon bodies are fusing together inside the fortress through a portal. They are merging into one monster. This is the hidden mission within the central island. All of them fuse into a demon woman. Upon awakening, she's already excited to fight, wearing black flames as clothing. She starts laughing maniacally. The little demon says that if it were up to the people, he wouldn't get too close to the fortress walls, because it's not like they can escape from there anyway. He then affirms that only two options remain. The first is that they can stay in place, resisting the attack of the undead, and then use the crystal to escape. However, the undead now are different from those they faced before. This way, they can anxiously await the undead. If they don't want the first option, they have the second, which consists of facing the Demon King that has been summoned inside the fortress. Shocked, a man asks if it's really the Demon King, and the woman says they never mentioned that before. While they argue, the demon states that he wanted to bring the Demon King. But the demon clarifies that he didn't summon the Demon King earlier because there was a high chance he wiped everyone out, but it was inevitable at some point, notifying them that the crystal will be activated in 30 minutes. He explains that it can only transport 500 people. In other words, half of the people there will be left behind. An important detail is that if they manage to defeat the Demon King, everyone can leave. And as special as this event is, he will eagerly await the outcome. He will patiently wait for everyone's decision. Frustrated, the medic says that all he thought he needed to do was survive for a month. Suddenly, someone starts clapping. Lee the Monarch says they should make the most of the 30 minutes and use the crystal to escape. In the background, the boy with glasses says he knows the man just wants his own clan to escape in the end. Then both stare at each other in silence. Responding, the man questions if it wouldn't be better to defend instead of advancing recklessly. They must think of a way to save the majority of the people. The man comments that this must be the monarch's idea, caring only about keeping his own people alive, no matter what happens to the others. Without showing any reaction, the man asks if he has any other plan. He notes that the demons on the first day wiped out dozens of them with a single attack. He wonders how they could defeat the Demon King like this. And what about the others? He asks if they would rather survive and move to the next island together. With a frightening expression, the guy questions if he's more inclined to rush toward his own death. The boy and his colleague fall silent. In the background, a girl is nervous, realizing the atmosphere has completely changed. But she tries to convince herself that everything will be fine since they are allies with the Smog clan. The protagonist arrives at the scene, affirming that the only way they can escape is by defeating the Demon King. This statement makes the girl even more nervous and confused. The protagonist concludes by saying that logically, only those who survive the battle will be able to get out of here. The man thinks to himself that this guy is interfering again. The monarch comments that the protagonist must be very confident he'll survive. Cyan Kang remarks that perhaps he will. However, he observes that if they fight for the crystal, it's obvious that at least 500 people will die, if not more. The blonde girl says that in that case, she'll follow him. She says they can't trust the clan leaders, so it doesn't make sense to join the clans right now. Raising their hands in excitement, people say they will fight the Demon King and escape together. Other members of the group arrive, declaring that they will fight alongside Kang Hansu. The earlier person starts getting more nervous, saying that with things going the way they are, they need to stop Kang Hansu right now, because it's important to destroy their morale. If the battle begins, everyone will fight to survive. As she contemplates ambushing him somehow, Kang warns her not to even think about fighting now, throwing his scythe with the chain near the girl, stating that it will be hard for her to deal with the consequences afterward. She becomes absolutely terrified by this warning. The monarch arrives, saying that what they are going to do now is cooperate with each other and resolve any disputes they may have, saying he'll follow his plan for the time being. With a grim look, he says they still have a chance. It seems everyone has already made some sort of decision. However, the hero asks everyone to give him a moment before they do anything. He says he needs to set things right. Then he takes out his new weapon to make an attack, chaining the crystal all at once. He puts pressure on it with the chains to the point of breaking it. This leaves the monarch and his colleague in shock, questioning what he is doing. The protagonist declares that since they're heading to the fortress, they won't need the crystal, because having an escape route would only make everyone weaker. People in the background agree with him, saying they need to focus on the task at hand. Everyone should head south to defeat the Demon King. Breaking the tension, Kang tells them not to follow him, stating they should take care of themselves and fight for their own survival. At that moment, the countdown ends and the test begins. A while later, they enter the Demon King's fortress. Inside, the sergeant remarks that this doesn't seem to be the same fortress he saw before because it's completely different. The atmosphere is dark with a purple hue and many candles lit around. There are numerous lit candelabras as if it were some kind of church. And the fortress is enormous, so large that there isn't even proper lighting to see the end of it. Just seeing this place already instills fear in people. Excited, the Demon King says it's been a long time. He says that if they came here
С тобою альфа и омега. С тобой бы уехал я на край света. Неважно, я в ресурсе или не был, но детка никогда тебя не забыл. Она подумала, что кретин. Зайди в мои чувства, магазин, зин. И я опять курю никотин, чтобы понять, что я не один. Нет, не подумай, я не кретин. Зайди в мои чувства, магазин. Для своей души найди анальгин. Любовь подарил тебе не один раз. Подарил тебе не один, два.
have fun, he can't let them leave now. Quickly, the doors slam shut, scaring everyone. The system notifies that the fortress has indeed been sealed. The ground begins to crumble rapidly. Several monsters start climbing up from beneath the floor, resembling undead goblins with a grotesque appearance. One of the people there is terrified. She screams for help as the monster charges at her. The protagonist's weapon strikes the creature. He tells the people not to panic, reminding them that these bastards are no different from the enemies they faced before. Looking at the boy who has fallen and is crying, he tells him to pull himself together and fight them. Deep in thought, he realizes that the real problem lies ahead, because to fight the Demon King, they need to get through all those gates. Suddenly, pillars of fire rise, and Kang warns everyone to step back. This is the gatekeeper demon with a murderous aura ready to fight and defend the fortress. Several fire demons begin to emerge. They are preparing to battle and protect the area. As they start attacking together, the protagonist orders everyone to get out of the way. A thick cloud of dust rises. With a serious expression, Hansu instructs that they must face the enemies separately. He tells those responsible for buffs to retreat to the back. Meanwhile, the long-range attackers should take their positions, concluding that those who aren't skilled enough should focus on guarding the perimeter. Park warns him to wait, as advancing recklessly could put everyone in danger. Ignoring him, the boy charges ahead, alerting the left flank that he's starting the attack. Kang knows this monster is based on the Abyssal Guardian, and despite still being relatively weak, its movements are quite similar. Therefore, he can easily predict its attacks. He throws his chain toward the monster, stating that he can now use the full power of Decratos. These chains can extend for dozens of meters. This is the power of the weapon the protagonist obtained. Using the suppression ability, he starts exerting pressure with the chains. As a result, the monster kneels. Kang can trap any opponent through his pressure. Draining its magical power, he casts a curse that lowers all of the opponent's stats. Though it drains his own mana, it's not something he can't handle. With a murderous aura, he asks if they're just going to stand there watching. All the fighters are impressed by the protagonist. Leader Park says they can't just sit by and watch. He orders everyone to prepare to attack, commanding his clan to fight for the honor of the group. The other leader says the weaker one should serve as support in the rear, and the team says they'll strike first. All the clans begin working together, attacking in sync. They start firing long-range weapons at the kneeling monster. It seems the monster is gradually losing its strength. However, flames start emerging from its sword. It looks like it's trying to invoke the infernal flame. A massive firepower begins to surge from within, starting to put pressure on the chains of the hero's weapon. Suddenly, the monster manages to stand up. Apparently, its stats have returned to normal. Kang tells them not to stop attacking for even a second, because it's hard to keep standing after all of this. If he focuses on the exact spot, he can finish off the Guardian once and for all. Determined, he charges in full force, channeling an enormous amount of energy and power into his sword. The girl says that's too dangerous and that the flames might render all his attacks useless. But the protagonist ignores her and decides to continue the assault. With his arm completely damaged, he says he needs to get rid of it, because the place where the flames originate is where the ignition stone is located. Without hesitation, he rips the stone out from inside the monster. Then he holds the stone in his hand. One of the onlookers asks what just happened, and Park states that the flames around the demon have completely disappeared. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel. This is why Dallin hadn't detected their approach. Intrigued, Dallin asked to test the object first. The bearded man agreed, but said Dalen would have to come closer to do so. The man's malicious grin revealed his true intentions. It was the perfect opportunity to ambush Dalen at close range, ready to let his square-shaped weapon sing a happy tune. Dalen, however, didn't take kindly to being deceived. The bearded man taunted that not even Dalen could dodge a bullet, but by the time he finished speaking, Dalen was practically upon him. It was only in those last moments that the bearded man realized the foolishness of his actions. Dalen struck him, not just with force, but with the rage of having been played for a fool. Unable to breathe, the bearded man writhed in agony, and Dalen demanded to know where they had come from. He took the man's identification, confirming they were mercenaries carrying a golden plaque from Boris. But Dalen hadn't forgotten about the bald mercenary. He wanted to know how long they intended to keep running. Realizing time was running out, Dalen got straight to the point. He approached the bald man and demanded to know who had stabbed the sacred knight in the back. The bald mercenary was shocked. He had no idea how Dalen knew about that. But Dalen explained that a sacred knight like Barrett wouldn't have fallen so easily, and it was up to the bald man to decide whether to tell the truth or die slowly. Reluctantly, the bald man confessed it was he who had attacked Barrett. He believed that by doing so, he would be able to claim the sacred sword and collect a reward from the demon, as both were already badly wounded. Lucia had arrived just in time to hear the confession, finally understanding what had happened. Her friend had died because of this cowardly bald man. The bald mercenary tried to justify his actions, admitting he was wrong. But apologies wouldn't change what was about to happen. With a simple movement of her sword, Lucia dismembered the mercenary's body, turning him into pieces. Looking at the bald man, she declared that was just the first and she wouldn't show him mercy. The bald mercenary, now crawling on the ground, obliterated and covered in massive wounds, regretted his cowardice. Lucia sighed in relief, saying that thanks to the demon letting the bald man escape alive, she was able to complete her vengeance. It was time for him to pay with his life. Facing death, the bald mercenary pleaded, saying he would do anything if she spared him. Lucia hesitated for a moment, confusion clouding her mind. But in the end, she struck him down. Mercy was for chickens, and she was a sacred knight. A yellowish glow emanated from her blade. Soon that glow enveloped the bald man's body as his screams echoed through the forest. Dalen hadn't expected to see those flames in a place like this. They were white flames divine in origin, known as demon-slaying flames. As they burned, they regenerated the nervous system of the victim, forcing them to feel the pain until their life was fully extinguished. Now only the ashes of the once petulant bald man remained before her. Dalen asked Lucia if she was alright, knowing the emotional toll this moment carried. She claimed there was nothing to worry about. He congratulated her on her deeds, hoping she would overcome this and live without regrets. Still immersed in her emotions, she thanked him. It was, after all, thanks to Dalen that she was able to preserve the honor of her friend. But Dalen corrected her, saying it wasn't him, it was her. She had never doubted Barrett and his character. Hearing this, she thanked him once again. Impressed with Dalen's performance, she suggested renegotiating the reward for the mission, and Dalen remarked that money is never too much. This broke the tension, and she smiled widely. Now she was eager to keep moving, as she didn't think she'd be able to sleep yet. As they traveled, Dalen collected another body, gaining 1 point of mana. He acquired more abilities, and by consuming an herb, he gained another point of stamina. 1 more body gave him an additional sense point. Their preparations were now complete. They stood before a cave, and it seemed this might be their final destination. Lucia remarked that something about the entrance felt off. Dalen remarked that a demon's lair would always be strange no matter what, and warned Lucia that there were likely hidden enemies around. Leading the way, he asked her to follow him closely. Stalactites hung densely from the ceiling of the cave. As they moved forward, something caught Lucia's attention. The path had seemingly come to an end, with a massive stone wall blocking their way. Dalen placed his hand on the wall, suspecting it could be opened with some kind of spell. Immediately sensing something, he warned Lucia to brace herself for what was coming. Suddenly, a powerful explosion occurred, nearly catching them off guard. A demon's voice echoed, laughing as he asked if his greeting had been too violent. He welcomed them and boasted that he had been watching them from the stars. Lucia, furious, could hardly wait to tear the demon's body apart with her sword. Dalen, on the other hand, thanked the demon for his warm greeting. It was time for him to return the favor. The demon, excited by the challenge, invited Dalen to do his best, promising to respond with care and kindness. After exchanging sarcastic pleasantries, the two began their fight. As the combat intensified, Lucia used Dalen as a step, launching herself into the air. Now airborne, Lucia prepared to strike the demon with all her might, determined to avenge her fallen comrade. Below her, the demon, seemingly oblivious, didn't react. But Dalen quickly realized it was a trap and shouted for Lucia to abort her attack. As she neared her target, the demon unleashed a powerful attack, like something out of a platform game's final boss fight. The blast was so strong that Lucia coughed up blood. Dalen had to catch her to prevent her from crashing violently to the ground. Both were stunned. This demon was supposed to be low level, yet he was incredibly strong. But there was no time to dwell on it. As the battle raged on, Dalen realized what had happened. The demon was absorbing power from the sacred sword hidden within the dungeon. Given the circumstances, Dalen knew he had to go all out. Using the domain, a power that made the impossible possible, Dallin began to shift the tides. The demon's confidence faltered as he felt an immense pressure building. Before him stood no ordinary human, and in disbelief, the demon asked if Dallin had truly mastered the territory. Confident, Dallin confirmed that he had. He warned the demon to prepare for the biggest beating he had ever witnessed. The demon, despite being washed, had not anticipated that Dallin could wield such power. But he insisted that no matter Dallin's efforts, he would not be defeated. Dallin stood his ground, waiting for the demon's attack. When it came, Dallin confidently countered, destroying the demon's assault with ease. Seizing the opportunity, he charged at the demon, whose disbelief deepened as he watched events spiral out of control. The mercenary was ready to end things without hesitation. Panicking, the demon's fear grew. He knew that he was in real danger of dying a painful death. To defend himself, the demon summoned a magical barrier, boasting that Dallin wouldn't even be able to scratch him. Enraged, Dallin retorted that the demon talked too much and did too little. With a powerful strike, Dallin shattered the demon's defense. Though the blow wasn't fatal, the demon lost several of his horns. But that wasn't enough for Dallin. He continued to apply pressure. The demon, now filled with rage, attempted to counterattack. Despite his strength, he couldn't land a hit on the persistent human. Using his abilities was taking a toll on Dallin's body, but his enhanced stamina was paying off. Without it, his body would have already been in pieces. Before him, the demon whined in agony, one of his arms severely injured. The demon moaned, realizing his malicious body wasn't regenerating from the blows. Despite his injured state, the demon still couldn't believe Dallin, a human who had just entered the labyrinth, could wield territory. Out of desperation, the demon called for his corrupted knight to defend him. A mournful figure stepped between Dallin and the demon. The knight, with a gaping hole in his chest, prepared to engage Dallin. Though just a body, the knight was skilled enough to block Dallin's attack. This was a setback for Dallin's plans. He hadn't anticipated another enemy. Finally, Dallin noticed something strange about the knight's body. It became clear that this was no ordinary foe. He was his sacred knight. Desperate, the demon fled, ordering his corrupted knight to buy him time. The body of Barrett obeyed the demon's command, blocking Dallin's advance. This was even more unexpected, since a low-class demon shouldn't be able to control his sacred knight. That's when Dallin noticed the strange chain around Barrett's neck, Hallman's chains, a powerful relic that forces an opponent to obey its master. Now Dallin understood how things had happened. The situation wasn't good. He needed to end this before the demon could fully regenerate. Lucia, behind him, began to apologize, feeling the weight of the situation. She said that her friend Barrett's body had been taken by evil, and it was her responsibility to resolve it. She urged Dallin to continue pursuing the fleeing demon, as she still had things to say to her stupid companion. Gripping her sword tightly, Dallin confirmed that the body before them was indeed Barrett's. Given the circumstances, Dallin decided to trust her. Lucia Castachel, an apprentice knight and investigator who eradicated the corrupt among the sacred, now had the duty to purify Barrett's body. She leaped towards the corrupted knight, who advanced in response, following his master's orders. Their swords clashed, and the fight between them was fierce. Meanwhile, the demon, who had managed to regenerate slightly, felt elated. Dallin caught up with him and asked if the demon had absorbed more power from the sacred sword. The demon, with a wicked grin, confirmed it, adding that things would be different from now on. Once again, the battle between Dallin and the demon began. But this time, it was harder, as the demon now wielded a new weapon. Dallin knew it was time to use his newly acquired ability. A red glow enveloped him as Dallin activated the pulverizing sword. The demon, now desperate, realized that not only could Dallin wield territory, but he also possessed incredibly dangerous skills. Furious, the demon asked how someone as mediocre as Dallin could do all of this. Desperate, he launched an attack, but his sword was completely shattered by Dallin's defense. Dallin's strike was too powerful for the demon, who was finally sliced apart. The blow had been devastating, and Dallin, surprised by his own strength, smiled. With the demon's defeat, 2 more bodies were discovered in the now silent dungeon. Meanwhile, the fight between Lucia and Barrett continued. They exchanged blows without stopping, but Lucia hesitated to do what needed to be done. Memories of the past flooded her mind. She remembered a wooden sword falling to the ground. Lucia had once told Barrett that he was too strong, which irritated her. Indeed, the future commander had extraordinary physical abilities, but Barrett, not seeing himself as a prodigy, asked her not to put so much pressure on him. Nevertheless, the compliments made him happy, though his change in posture frustrated her. Barrett remarked that Lucia had improved a lot since the last time they trained together. Lucia, proud, stood up, saying she had practiced a lot and would one day defeat him. With a calm smile, Barrett promised to face her whenever she wished. Now, however, they fought, but not in the way Lucia had wanted. She didn't want things to come to this. She didn't want to see the man she admired so much in this state. The confusion and the gravity of the situation were hard for her to bear. With skill, she managed to close the distance between them, pressuring Barrett with precise strikes. Lucia shouted at Barrett's body, saying she didn't want him to appear before her like this, especially not the last time they would meet. But Barrett's unresponsive body didn't react to her words. The clash of their swords lessened, and they distanced themselves once again. Now Barrett was just a body, devoid of reactions. Lucia was resolute that the right thing to do was to end his life there. Barrett prepared to attack again with no emotion whatsoever. He raised his sword to block her next strike. When their swords clashed once more, Lucia was precise, but she suffered a minor wound on her face. Barrett, too, was injured, and his wounds were more severe. Lucia, catching her breath, acknowledged that he was still talented, but this time he had lost. Barrett's body began to be engulfed in holy white flames. Soon, his entire body was consumed by the fire. Lucia, standing before him, was determined to end it all. But then something made her hesitate. As she looked at Barrett, she noticed something that stopped her from delivering the final blow. A look of emotion appeared on Barrett's face, and a brief word of gratitude escaped his lips. Lucia struggled to hold back her tears as she witnessed what was happening. She tightened her grip on her sword, determined to finish what they had begun. This was her final farewell to Barrett Strumman, the Sacred Knight, a great and talented prodigy with impeccable conduct and exemplary ethics. Finally, Lucian to
попробуй взять, попробуй отнять. Покажи свое противостояние. Что обертка не более, знаешь, плевать. Повернуть время вспять, чтобы выйти опять и залатать свои пробелы. Знаешь, однако не просто лезть в свои мысли, лететь своей костью, репетировать слово свобода внутри, понимаешь, а не отморозка, Наверное, было сейчас броско, я бы сделал тут отступ, но после него следует контратака. Молодой, ничего не понимаю, город колот меня изнутри.
Delivered the strike that ended everything. Though wounded, a faint smile formed on his face. Prostrating herself, Lucia gave in to her emotions. This was not the ending she had wanted for her friend who vanished like sacred ashes. Dallin remarked that the knight must have been happy, knowing that his last moments were spent in her company. Tears streamed down Lucia's face. Overcome with emotion, she cried like a child. The dusk lit the sky as Barrett fulfilled his purpose in life. In another scene, two men discussed how the demon had also perished, calling him useless, incapable of protecting the sword he had been given. One of them warned the other to be cautious in criticizing a demon, as the other was a traitor among the sacred knights. The man reprimanded the older one, reminding him they weren't in a place where they could raise suspicion. Indeed, there was no harm in being careful. As they left, one mentioned that the other was welcome to visit the cave at any time, as the demon had authorized it. Now it was time for them to plan their next move. Standing before a simple gravestone, Lucia lamented that Barrett would be missed. She added that he would be remembered as a sacred knight who fell while performing his duty. With the mission completed, it was time to discuss payment, and Lucia asked Dallin if he had any amount in mind. Dallin indeed had something in mind, something that only the sacred knights could provide him. At the Order's headquarters in Polshan, they were received by the knights. A man greeted them, saying that their efforts in coming this far were appreciated and recognized. He introduced himself as Albus, administrative officer of the Order. The mercenary introduced himself, and Lucia mentioned that it had been a while since they had been formally presented. Although their achievement warranted recognition from the captain himself, he wouldn't be available to meet them personally, and he hoped they would understand. Their reward would be 30 gold coins and a recommendation for a sacred tattoo. This was a unique ability granted by the god of war to the Order of Sacred Knights, allowing for the efficient use of divine power. The tattoo was primarily used to enhance physical and magical power, though it wasn't limited to just that. Now Dallin would need to go to the Fissure, a place teeming with dormant divine power. Only the captain and vice-captain could perform the ritual, so they would need to meet with one of them. Dallin was already planning to visit that location, so he would be seeing them soon. But Albus added that there was something else he wished for them to accept. It was a corrupted relic, the Chain of Hallman, which had been lost for 400 years. In its current state, they couldn't use it, but Albus thought Dallin might make better use of it. Dallin's eyes lit up with joy at hearing this, but he knew there was more, and he urged Albus not to beat around the bush. Indeed, Albus had something to ask of the mercenary. Lucia felt embarrassed by the blunt way Dallin spoke. Turning to the officer, she said that this mercenary wasn't someone who could be bought with compliments and gifts. She then handed her reward to Dallin, stating that she had received it because of his efforts and hoped he would accept it. This wasn't the reaction Albus had expected, nor the outcome he anticipated. Apologizing, Albus admitted he had acted inappropriately, but Dallin wanted to know what situation had driven him to such behavior. A moment of hesitation crossed Albus's lips. Someone within the Order was seeking possession of the sacred sword. Lucia couldn't believe it. Barrett had already died because of it, and she refused to accept that someone else wanted the sword. Even Albus found it hard to believe. He had received a letter a few days ago instructing that if the sword was recovered, it should be sent to the Order's headquarters. But upon inspecting the letter, he found the hidden message within it. Lucia didn't understand, but Dallin quickly realized that there was a traitor inside the Order. Without hesitation, he agreed to help them, and Albus thanked him for his support. Albus offered to make another recommendation for a sacred tattoo and to provide more coins, but Dallin refused. He didn't need riches now. He had already received his reward, he said, holding the relic in his hand. Elsewhere, they spoke of ensuring that the message would soon be delivered. A look of surprise crossed the woman's face as she said she had heard rumors that Dallin had left the labyrinth and would only return in a few days. Before she could finish, she heard the sound of footsteps. She turned around to see who had arrived. It was Dallin, and he remarked that if she kept shouting like that, her ears might just fall off her head. Apologizing, she admitted that she hadn't expected him back so soon. Even the man present was happy, barely believing it was him. Dallin confirmed it was indeed him. The man expressed his deep gratitude that Dallin had returned safely, but the mercenary could tell he was very drunk. Noticing the silhouette of what he was carrying, Santa asked what he had with him. Placing the chest on the table, Dallin told her to give it to an expert who could open it without damaging it and to have whatever was inside discounted in 4 days. Seated at the table, he wanted to know what brought Bulkma there, and Sienna explained that she would tell him. She said that he had asked her to search for things that could increase physical strength. She found nothing in rituals or spells because they either had severe side effects or required impossible to obtain ingredients. So she shifted her focus to herbs, especially those from wandering merchants and specialized cultivators. Bulkma, lifting his glass and raising his voice, said that's when he found exactly what Dallin had been looking for. He asked Dallin if he remembered the small town of Lebebach, and Dallin said he did. Near that town, dozens of mandrakes had been discovered. Dallin could hardly believe what he had just heard. Indeed, it could very well be just a rumor. Even Sienna suspected it was merely gossip, but Bulkma, confident in his financial expertise, claimed that when it came to money, he knew more than both of them. If the rumor were true, it had probably been downplayed. There were likely more mandrakes than people realized. This legendary herb not only boosts magic, but also stamina. However, it could scream so loudly that it might cause a human heart to explode. Meanwhile, the Ashen Witch had already started executing her plans. Lebebach was located in the southwestern part of the continent, in the same direction as the Fissure, where the Sacred Knights were stationed. Dallin asked if Bulkma was heading there to make money, and indeed, that was the plan. If that was the case, Dallin decided to join him, which delighted Bulkma even more. But then Bulkma paused, remembering something before raising a toast. He realized he hadn't understood that Dallin meant to actually accompany him on the journey. He couldn't believe it. So Dallin repeated that Bulkma had said he was heading to that town and Dallin would be going with him. Inside the fortress, there were horses and soldiers preparing for the journey. It should have been a pleasant business trip, but Bulkma had grown quite tired during the travel. As Bulkma tried to recover, someone greeted him with a good morning. It was Dallin who, noticing his friend's weary expression, asked if something was wrong. Perhaps it was just a hangover, and not knowing who the woman beside him was, Dallin asked about her. Lucia introduced herself as a sacred knight. Since they were heading in the same direction, Dallin had decided to bring her along on the journey. Bulkma felt honored to meet a sacred knight. He started to flatter both of them, which left them feeling a bit embarrassed, and Dallin asked when they would be departing. Bulkma said they would leave early in the afternoon, so Dallin said he would return before then. As they left, Bulkma asked where they were headed, and Dallin replied that he had killed a demon and was going to collect his reward. The essence of demons could guarantee a significant reward for those who could obtain it, and that was the place where they would retrieve it. The management office of the labyrinth held the key to their reward. But there was a far more important reason for their visit. They wanted to speak with one of the transcendentals of the Diamond Palace. Evan invited Dallin to sit in his office, offering something to drink. Before long, a warm beverage was served. Defeating a demon on his first visit to the labyrinth was impressive, but Dallin downplayed it, saying it was just luck, and that luck still seemed to be on his side. Evan observed him with curiosity after that remark. Not only once but twice, Dallin had encountered the Transcendentals. Earlier, he hadn't recognized Evan, as he appeared quite different from what was expected in the game. The Man of 1,000 Faces, Levrin Hakim, was essentially a one-man army. Dallin knew he needed to gain his favor and turn him into an ally. Evan mentioned that Dallin was being watched by the gods, and there was only one way to achieve that. Dallin began to mention how apostles and demons, all of them, spoke about their gods. Perhaps the gods had some kind of disorder that made them enjoy spying on humanity. Before he could finish the sentence, the energy in the room shifted completely. Even the tea in his cup almost spilled over. The man before him said sternly, "That tone I just heard borders on blasphemy." Trying to explain himself, Dallin replied, "I'm not exactly a man of faith." The man continued, "I don't know. Perhaps you have no faith at all. And sure, you aren't from this region." It was as if the man knew everything about Dallin, leaving him unsure of how to respond. Looking at him, the man asked, "What's so funny?" Dallin answered, "I've never been past the frozen mountains. Maybe your watcher of 100 eyes and storyteller of 1,000 years forgot to mention that." For some reason, this made the man smile. He hadn't expected Dallin to know about the prophet, and he admitted, "Contrary to what I thought, you're a fascinating man." He added, "Talking to you feels like speaking with my friends, the ones people call Transcendentals." It seemed Dallin had survived the worst and now had the man's full attention. Cutting to the point, he asked Dallin, "Do you have the essence of the demon you defeated? If so, I'd like to take a look." The carriages moved through the forest. Inside one of them sat Dallin and Lucia. On Dallin's lap was a bag full of gold coins. He hadn't expected such a significant reward, especially with what Sienna had managed to obtain as well. With this, he could now afford high-quality equipment and even more relics. At the window, a young boy brought a message from Bolthma, asking how Dallin's trip was going. Dallin replied that everything was fine in his carriage. Noticing the boy, he asked, "Are you new here?" The question stirred memories of his earlier days. Curious, Dallin asked the boy's name and found out he was called Perrin. It was his third mission, and he still hadn't received his mercenary registration. Encouraging him, Dallin said the registration would come soon if he kept working hard. The boy's face lit up with excitement, and Lucia, surprised by Dallin's kindness, commented, "I didn't expect that from you." Confused, Dallin asked, "What do you mean?" "I didn't think you'd be kind to a child so easily," she said. "I thought you were just a mission-obsessed mercenary, always chasing money." Dallin chuckled, admitting that the boy reminded him of his younger self. As they continued their conversation, a voice suddenly shouted, "We're under attack." A massive horde of orcs charged toward them. Quickly disembarking, Lucia sighed, wishing for a peaceful journey, while Dallin asked, "Where's Bolthma?" Scanning the area, Dallin's system alerted him to the presence of a young mercenary's body and another who wielded lightning. In the middle of the orcs, one of them seemed to be the leader. Excited, Dallin declared he would lead the charge and called for those willing to follow. As he advanced, the orcs were dismembered mercilessly in his path. However, the snow caused Dallin to slip slightly. Reflecting on how hard he had been pushing himself lately, he wondered if fatigue was finally catching up with him. As he tried to regain his footing, an orc prepared to strike him with its club. Against all odds, the young boy Perrin intervened, saving him just in time. "Are you alright?" Perrin asked as Dallin thought to himself, "This kid's really good." Passing by him, Dallin thanked the boy and assured him, "I'm fine." Now he needed to remain vigilant. Feeling weary, Dallin decided to finish the fight quickly. With one swift throw of his axe, he split the orc leader's head in two. In a hurry, he moved to claim the green-skinned corpse of that disgusting beast. As the battle ended, orc bodies littered the snowy ground. Perrin, full of admiration, said, "Lucia, you're amazing. Do you think I could become a holy knight one day?" Lucia, smiling warmly, replied, "If you keep training, you'll be even stronger than me one day. You're already pretty talented." Curious, the boy asked, "Why are orcs here? They're not from this region." Lucia explained that they might be refugees from territorial conflicts. Listening intently, Dallin wanted to know more about the situation. With monsters becoming more active recently, there wasn't enough space for them in the mountains anymore. This was the first stage of an invasion, where the monsters of the continent grew more aggressive. However, Lucia noted that the invasion wasn't intense enough to have caused the orcs to lose their territory just yet. That would happen during the second stage of the invasion. Maybe it means they have skipped the practice phase and are now truly starting the game. Before the bodies, he begins collecting them. A notification from the system says he inherited the skills of that body. His senses, intelligence, and mana increased by 1 point each. As a newly inherited ability, he can now manipulate electricity. That ability will be very useful in Levabok. While he is distracted, someone from the caravan calls him back saying they are ready to depart. Dallin says he's coming. It won't take long until he meets the Ash Witch. There are many people in the city, probably because the rumor of the mandrakes has spread. He asks where the mercenary is going, and the latter responds that he will stay there for a few more days. Since he will be leaving soon, he bids them farewell, as he can't waste time selling his things. Lucia asks why they joined the caravan of merchants. He asks if Lucia knows anything about witches, but she only read about them in her previous lessons. They have the power of an archmage by birth and were persecuted due to their immense power. As a result, there are very few left, and they are generally hostile towards ordinary humans. Indeed, that is true, and one of them is in this city, one who hates humanity more than the other witches, and he is here to eliminate this witch. Lucia wants to know if this witch is related to the growth of mandrakes. Even though they are medicinal herbs, once harvested, they begin to scream, which could end up killing someone. If hundreds of them were harvested at once, a great tragedy could befall the city. If that's the case, they should hurry, but Dallin asks her to calm down. After all, he has a plan. A small mouse scurries along the city floor. That place they are in doesn't have good energy, and Lucia, being a sacred knight, confirms this. The witch is preparing a powerful ritual, and she needs people to help gather sacrifices. Inside, someone asks who they are and what they want. Dallin is confident that he has found something. That dark mana and the smell is certainly a dark mage. He heard that there was a good fortune teller in that place, and the figure says he didn't know Dallin was a customer. From inside, Dallin apologizes. The mysterious eyes now focus on Lucia. He says they came to the right place. Opening the door discreetly, he invites them in to continue the conversation inside. So both of them enter the house. They follow the short man through the dimly lit place. Dallin senses that there are 6 people upstairs, and counting the man in front of them, there are 7 in total. He wants the man to hurry up and get his fortune read by the woman. But the man says she's not there right now, and she's preparing for something bigger. Before he finishes speaking, several mages jump at them in a hostile manner. They expect them to become sacrifices for the greater cause they've been speaking of. Dallin is unimpressed by it. Lucia also gets ready to attack them. A great flash of abilities lights up the interior of the house. The mages try to attack, but their attempts are completely futile. One of them, now badly injured, realizes that Lucia is a sacred knight. She doesn't bother to confirm it, only calling him disgusting. The others, noticing that she is a sacred knight, panic and focus their attacks on her. A huge mistake, as Dallin smiles at the situation. After all, he is the real danger in that place, not anyone else. It doesn't take long for the ones who aren't dead to be writhing in pain on the floor. One of them is still alive, and the mercenary stares at him. The terrified mage wants to know who they are, if they were sent by the order of the Sacred Knights. Then Dallin grabs him firmly by the neck. Frightened, the mage decides to tell them where the old lady they are looking for is. That was exactly what Dallin wanted, sarcastically saying that the mage would be her sacrifice. From now on, they would be inside the witch's barrier. Dallin orders the mage to keep walking without stalling. The demonic mana is getting stronger, a sign they are nearing the witch. As they walk, Dallin notices something. Lucia senses his unease and asks what he saw. It might have been his imagination, but he felt the sacred sword move. Lucia says it must be drained of all divine power, but Dallin insists that he felt something and found it odd. Regardless, she also feels a cursed mana in the place. Before he could finish speaking, Dallin saw a cage filled with people. They were writhing in pain, and some of their appearances were disfigured, creating a disturbing and cruel scene too harsh to behold. Lucia took a moment to believe what her eyes were seeing. Among those people was Perrin, the young boy from the journey. She wanted to free him immediately, but Dallin held her back, asking her to wait. In disbelief, she questioned him, insisting they needed to save him right away. It was then that a sinister voice echoed. The witch was there, watching them. For a barbarian, you sure think quickly, the witch sneered. A strong wind blew in front of them, and the witch revealed herself. With a malicious smile, she said it was very rude of them to invade her territory. Didn't your parents teach you not to enter other people's homes like that? She mocked. Lucia, enraged, demanded to know how the witch had the courage to commit such atrocities. However, the witch only took notice of the fact that a holy knight was present, something quite unusual. The mage, now cowering in fear, knew he should not have brought them there and began pleading for mercy, claiming he was threatened. The witch had no patience for his excuses. She reminded him that she had asked for sacrifices, and if he failed, disobedient children deserved death. Before he could finish explaining, his face began to change, contorting in pain. Before the witch could act against Dallin and Lucia, Dallin's axe had already struck her in the face. He was tired of all the pointless chatter and knew that was just a fake body. He demanded the real witch show herself. She stood up, smiling, impressed by Dallin's quick thinking, and said he was smarter than he looked. This is going to be fun, she stated with a wicked look, asking if they wanted to play with an innocent old grandma. With a gesture, she summoned giant wolves to entertain Lucia. Concerned, Dallin asked Lucia if she could handle it, and she affirmed she could, although she was clearly nervous. They moved into combat. Dallin, using his jump ability, leaped ahead, cutting the path to approach the witch. He attempted to strike her several times, but to no avail. She seemed to enjoy the situation, taunting him as she dodged easily. The witch then cast a fire spell, expecting him to show his true power. Dallin, however, channeled lightning into his axe, surprising the witch. Distracted, she didn't notice that he was actually aiming at her true body, which was far away. A loud explosion occurred in the distance, and the real witch's body was hit. Coughing, she admitted she had been careless. The citizens are tense, unsure of what's happening, with some thinking it might be an earthquake. The witch wants to destroy everyone in the city, but Dallin says he knows about the humiliation she suffered there. Still, her actions are unjustifiable. Her methods are cruel and inhumane. Revenge or not, she would never be forgiven for what she did to others. She should use the life she has to pay for the sins she's committed. His speech made the witch reconsider some things. Even though centuries had passed, she never forgot. The humans were indeed terrified of the power witches wielded. They were persecuted and repressed with violence. Knowing all she had endured in her life, she disliked being judged by the mercenary, as he knew nothing of what she had gone through until now. Her demonic aura grew immensely, repelling Dallin far away. It was then that he noticed something. The witch opened several portals and said she would burn him until only bones remained. As lightning bolts approached, he did his best to defend himself. Dallin struggled to concentrate his remaining strength. With one strike of his sword, he deflected the lightning. A massive flash surged across the horizon. In the clearing of the battle, a huge mark was etched into the ground. Dallin tried to catch his breath while looking for the witch, unsure of where she was or if she had fled the scene. Finally, he identified someone coughing heavily. The fight had been easy. Despite her receiving power from a dark god, perhaps she hadn't fully adapted to it yet. Brandishing his sword again, he was determined to end it all now. Without hesitation, he rushed toward the witch with speed, but she wasn't the least bit surprised by the imminent attack. Before he could reach her, she raised one of her hands. Besides irritating her deeply, he was making her use things she had kept in reserve. Dallin didn't understand what she meant by things. Looking around, he noticed the mandrakes, and it seemed they were starting to awaken. Slowly, they began to rise from the ground. Immediately, a terrifying, blood-curdling scream filled the air. Dallin now found himself in the midst of a deadly and horrifying cacophony. His knees buckled, and he collapsed to the ground. Tomato juice flowed from his mouth, and he couldn't move. The witch said the fight had been fun, but now he wouldn't be able to do anything against her. Summoning a powerful spell, she conjured a large fireball above her, intending to finish off the mercenary once and for all. She attacked him, taking advantage of his inability to defend himself. The fireball consumed everything in its path. Once again, destruction could be seen across the horizon. Finally, she completed her attack, remarking that Dallin had lasted longer than expected. She couldn't even remember the last time she had to exert so much effort to defeat a human. As she admired the devastation caused by her spell, she was pleased with how much she had enjoyed herself. Now all that was left was for her to return to the city. But someone asked her where she thought she was going. A different blade appeared. The witch couldn't believe what she saw and demanded to know how it was possible. The mercenary was wielding the sacred sword. Earlier, he hadn't been wrong about the sword. When the witch used her mana, he felt it resonate again. The sacred sword had trembled gently. Even so, the witch was in disbelief that this had happened. The sword could only be wielded by those chosen by the god of war, and it seemed Dallin had been unexpectedly chosen. Dallin taunted her, saying that even the god of war wanted her gone. Referring to the sword, he quipped that it should have vibrated more as he would have used it from the start. Now with the sword in hand, he challenged the witch to attack him again, promising that this time he would finish her properly. However, the witch refused to accept the taunt, declaring that losing to him was absurd. Even with the sacred sword, defeating her was impossible. Dallin glanced around and noticed green ashes accumulating. They were so hot that it seemed if they touched his skin, he would melt. This was one of the witch's innate abilities, the curse of the ashes. As she gathered her power, the witch said that even if he was chosen by the god of war, it didn't matter. He would turn to ashes all the same. The sacred sword had two primary abilities. The first was its immense durability. Dallin prepared himself, channeling his lightning ability. With the sword charged with energy, he readied himself to counter her attack. This is the second ability of the sword, enhancing the user's abilities. The witch is in disbelief that her attack was repelled so easily. While she is distracted, Dallin prepares to strike once again. With the sacred sword in hand, he is ready to deliver another attack. The witch didn't think he could still use his territory. This time, the attack flies through the air, leaving the witch powerless to stop it. With little choice, she uses her curse once again, this time to defend herself. However, Dallin's attack is too powerful now. An explosion of blue light erupts in the clearing, electricity surging through the witch's body. Though heavily injured and panting, she mocks Dallin, asking if he thinks he has won the battle. Dallin is confused by her words, and the witch reveals her plan. She had planted over 2,000 mandrakes in the forest. If they all screamed at once, every resident in the city would die. Even with her death, her revenge, planned for years, would be fulfilled. Dallin responds by acknowledging that mandrakes are sensitive to their environment and only grow in a dense forest like the one they're in. The witch confirms this, but says there's nothing he can do about it. However, she's overlooked something. Dallin mentions that he could simply destroy the forest with his sword. Coincidentally, he possesses a skill that would be perfect for this moment, gained from defeating the demon in the labyrinth, Fire Rain. As he begins to invoke the spell, the witch is stunned. She demands to know how it's possible that Dallin is using a spell once cast by the former master of the Ignella Magic Tower. Elsewhere, Lucia is still engaged in battle. She runs through the forest, trying to avoid the wolves, knowing Dallin is still fighting the witch and that she must hurry. One of the wolves charges at her with great force. Lucia dodges its attack and lands on a tree branch, which she uses as leverage to jump back and strike. Her blow is devastating, and the wolf's blood sprays into the air. The remaining wolf, terrified after witnessing its comrade's beheading, trembles in fear. Lucia wastes no time and prepares to attack the last one. With incredible agility, she makes multiple swift strikes, leaving the beast severely wounded. Finally, she pauses to catch her breath, eager to reunite with Dallin as soon as possible. Looking toward the horizon, she notices something surprising, fire raining down from the sky, setting the forest ablaze. Meanwhile, all of Dallin's clothes have been burnt away, but his dragon's blood continues to heal him. The witch, engulfed in flames, doesn't understand how a human could know such powerful magic and still possess dragon's blood. Before she can say anything else, her ashes are scattered by the wind. The system notifies Dallin that his target has finally been silenced. Looking at the remains, Dallin remarks how villains always seem to say the same things. Now he must collect the body left behind. But Lucia is approaching, wanting to check if Dallin is alright. He assures her that everything is fine, but Lucia is left stunned by the unusual scene in front of her. Her face turns bright red, as though it might explode. Dallin, ever the oblivious one, doesn't understand what's happening until he finally realizes that he's standing naked in front of her. He explains that the fight was more intense than expected. Lucia, mustering all her courage, shouts at him, saying that it doesn't matter how intense the fight was, he shouldn't be naked in front of her at such a moment. She quickly tells him she will find something for him to wear and orders him to cover up until then. Despite the fierce battle, the city remains calm. Finally, Dallin is dressed in new clothes. Thanks to the gold coins he had, he was able to buy high-quality equipment. 2 days have passed since the witch's death. The mandrakes were completely burned, and the merchants who had come to the city because of them have now left. Dallin announces his arrival and is greeted by Lucia. She asks how he's doing, and he replies that he's better after resting. Dallin then inquires about the boy, and Lucia informs him that he woke up briefly but quickly fell back to sleep. Unfortunately, the other captives didn't survive. Seeing the boy in such a state fuels Dallin's hatred toward Anaxagoras. Perhaps the reason he was brought to this land is to defeat this dark god. Dallin turns to Lucia, wanting to know how she's doing after her battle. Lucia is physically fine despite the battle, but she feels sad, lamenting that if they had arrived earlier, the boy wouldn't be in such a state. As for the sense of guilt, there's not much Dallin can do. He understands that losing someone you care about is an experience no one wants to go through more than once. Dallin tells her not to blame herself too much, as even though they couldn't save everyone, they managed to save that young boy, which is already a significant victory. Looking at him, Lucia reflects on his words. Indeed, it's essential to see the positive side of life. As Dallin prepares to leave, he asks her to take care of the boy because he has things to do in the forest. He explains that when she hurried him out of there, he didn't manage to retrieve something important. As he leaves, she teases him, saying it was his fault for not being cautious and having his clothes incinerated. Looking at the devastated forest, Dallin admits he didn't expect the power of the ability to be so great. However, there's nothing he can do now, as it was necessary to deal with the mandrakes, though he feels a little bad for the merchants. Finally, he finds what he was looking for. Indeed, he had been defeated by the witch multiple times. There are 5 bodies here. He begins the process of collecting them. His senses and strength increase by 1 point each. There's nothing special from the herbalist or the warrior, but there are still other bodies left to collect. Among them, there was a sacred knight who had been chasing the witch. Looking at the body, he tries to recall the knight's name. He remembers that the knight had been infatuated with the witch's appearance and pursued her throughout the game. A somewhat embarrassing memory for Dallin. Collecting the body, his stamina increases by 1 point. He also gains a new skill, Curse Prevention Seal, a very useful ability when dealing with dark mages. Looking back, he contemplates what's left. This is the final body to collect, and so he begins the process. Something different happens this time. A dark energy coalesces, forming something resembling a dagger in the middle. Dallin picks it up. It's the Black Moon Spellbreaker dagger, capable of cutting through and destroying enchantments. Although powerful, it can be countered with a sword strike. He hadn't expected to collect items along with the bodies. Excited, Dallin looks forward to finding the remaining bodies. Now that he's done what he needed, he heads back to the city. Behind him, a peculiar flower sprouts from the ground. Timing couldn't be better. Later that night, Dallin is sitting in the tavern, quietly drinking at the bar. The battle had been fruitful. He collected 4 bodies and even obtained an item. But the greatest achievement was being able to wield the sacred sword. The Knight's Order official had told him the sword had lost all of its divine power, meaning it shouldn't have vibrated. Dallin wonders if the god of war really chose him. While he ponders, someone approaches, asking why he's still in town. It's the shopkeeper, who recognizes him even from behind. Dallin asks why he's in the bar and if he's looking for work. Gallius responds that his business is large and preparations take time. Gallius asks about Perun, the boy from the journey, and Dallin explains that the boy's injuries are quite serious. Even Gallius expresses regret over what happened to the boy. Moved, Gallius hands over a large sum of money, asking Dallin to give it to Perun so he can take care of himself while he recovers. Seeing the large amount, Dallin asks if it's okay. Gallius, as a merchant who crossed paths with the boy, says it's the least he can do. Dallin smiles, appreciating the merchant's kindness, remarking that he's much more generous than he appears. Gallius says it's his greatest virtue. However, Gallius then shares some troubling rumors he's heard recently. The dead are rising in the northern frontier of the empire. Dallin is shocked and asks him to repeat what he just said. Gallius reassures him, saying it's just a rumor for now, and begins to explain the source. In the northern empire, there's a town called Langleton, where pagan cultists have appeared suddenly. They've been spreading word that the end is near, telling people to prepare an altar and worship, for he will soon descend. Shortly after the cultists' arrival, strange things began happening at night. Skeletal remains were seen rising from their graves and entering the town. Dallin realizes this can only be the work of a necromancer if they're speaking of the descent of a greater evil. There's no doubt about what's coming. The immortal demon will be released from its sealing soon. This will be annoying because he is truly immortal, which is why he was sealed. Dallin is thinking of ways to deal with him. This is taking up a bit of his thoughts, but there is a method that might work very well. Gallius wants to know if Dallin has any idea of what might be happening, and he says the rumor must be false but thanks him for sharing it with him. Inside where he is staying, he thinks a little more. Since he is busy transporting the sacred sword, now more work has come up to be done. Then he heard a voice in the background asking to be taken along. Lucia and Perun are arguing. She says that if something goes wrong from here on, the boy could lose his life. But he says he is prepared for that and wants to accompany them on the journey. Dallin says he should stay and recover, but he wants to know why they are arguing. Lucia says that as soon as the boy learned about their departure, he wanted to join them. Perun says he really wants to help them. He promises he won't be a burden. Taking an injured person with them is a big risk. The path leading to the destination of the sacred sword is dangerous, and there might still be a traitor in the order. But there's something about the boy that captivates him. Seeing his eyes, he already has an answer. Dallin wants to know if the boy would be able to pack his own things. Perrin says he certainly could. He also wants to know if he can set up camp, and Perrin says yes, but it might take a little time. With that, it's already decided. The boy will be hired as a porter and mercenary. This made him extremely grateful. Lucia watches the scene, but is apprehensive. She's not sure if things will turn out well because the boy is still injured. But everything will be fine because he brought something that could be useful. He picked it up on the way here. Perrin can't believe what he's seeing. What's in his hands is a mandrake. Dallin gave him the plant, and Lucia wants to know how he got it, as she thought they had all been burned. But one of them was lucky and ended up surviving. With that, Dallin says they are leaving that night, and if the boy doesn't want to be a burden, he should eat well and recover quickly. Night has finally reached the city. They follow the path on horseback, and the boy is sleeping. In Lucia's lap, he is sweating a lot. She informs Dallin about this and says they should stop to rest a bit. The boy is too exhausted to continue. Since they have been camping for a while, Dallin decides to stop so they can rest. Lucia says she's glad they are with the boy and didn't expect Dallin to allow this. He says he didn't imagine she had such a poor impression of him. As Dallin requested, she's been teaching him in recent days, and his skills have improved significantly. His moves during an orc attack aren't a coincidence, and she is thinking of getting him to join the Order of Sacred Knights. Sacred Knight Perrin, that's a title that sounds very good. As soon as she finished speaking, Dallin felt a strange energy. The same passed through Lucia, who also felt it. Riding his horse forward, he calls for Lucia, who said she also felt the same thing. They continue on their horses and approach a house. There's a smell of blood in the air. Lucia says they should inspect the place first, and he agrees. Leaving the boy leaning against a tree, he hopes he will be fine and safe. They should enter immediately, and the door opens. Inside, they notice it's strong. A woman greets them and calls them visitors. It must have been hard for them to reach there. Her clothes resemble those of a maid. Dallin notices that it's not just the smell of blood in the place. It's the foul smell of blood in the air. It comes from someone who has hunted and consumed dozens of people. The woman asks if it's just the two of them, as she prepares meals based on the number of guests. Dallin says there are 3 and requests 2 rooms and 3 meals. The woman asks them to wait a little longer. He knows she must have deceived many people this way. Every sense in his body tells him this woman is extremely dangerous. Turning to Lucia, he asks if there's anything she needs. Then she says she would like to have her bath prepared before the meal. Dallin tells her to go up first. He will follow with Perrin. He glances at her discreetly. Lucia knows the place is dangerous, but they need to maintain the act. With the meal ready, the woman expects them to enjoy it well. Dallin thanks her for having made the meal. As he breaks the bread, he says he hasn't seen other guests and asks if business is going poorly. But she says there were a few last month and wants to know if he had heard anything on his way there. Dallin eats the bread while thinking. He said he had heard about bodies wandering in a nearby town. Reanimated bodies, she says she has never heard such a crazy story. The boy asks if she is from the Empire, but the woman became defensive. He says he is from the Empire and that she has the same accent as he does. Then she says she grew up there but hasn't returned to her homeland in 10 years. Hearing this, he was surprised that she still kept her accent. Because he's disappeared a year after leaving, he wants to know how she has maintained hers. A silence filled the room completely. Dallin was pleased with the boy's cleverness. This was an excellent excuse to let his axe sing. As he stands up, some men suddenly appear. Injured, they mumble that there was a monster there. Dallin knows that Lucia is upstairs. He asked the men if the monster is a sacred knight. Drying herself, she said they tried to attack her as soon as she entered the bath. This is definitely something serious. Looking at the woman, Dallin ordered her to start explaining quickly. Smiling, she said she would have consumed him calmly, but she can't do that anymore. Chanting an incantation, a detestable aura filled the place. Then undead began to reveal themselves in the room. The reanimated bodies were now there. Indeed, this is the work of a necromancer. Perrin defends himself from the bodies using his sword, but after cutting one of them, he was surprised by the result. Even without half its head, the body kept advancing. The woman says they are already dead and can no longer die because of that. Once they are exhausted, she will eat them and suggests they surrender obediently. Cutting one of the zombies, Dallin says she is right, the dead cannot die. But there are other ways to stop them. The dagger he received is a spell nullifier, and it can end the undead. Wielding it, he advances toward the bodies. Dallin is determined to make sure those bodies don't move anymore. His first strike is powerful. The necromancer cannot believe what she is seeing. Her spell had been completely destroyed. Against incantations and spells, it is necessary to use the right weapon. This dagger destroys most magic with just simple contact, and even small cuts from this dagger can produce a fatal curse on the sorcerer. Meanwhile, Perrin tries to defend himself from a zombie. Lucia realizes the boy is in danger. She asks him to hold on a little longer because she's coming to save him. But he tells her not to worry because he can handle it. The skeleton keeps getting closer. Before he could do anything, the body loses the light in its eyes and falls inert on the boy, who was disgusted. Even Lucia didn't understand and wonders if the necromancer had died. Now the boy asks for Lucia's help, and she goes to his aid. Wounded, the necromancer wants to know how her spell was destroyed so easily, but she wasn't in the mood to hear the answer because she could provide them immediately. But once again, the black dagger comes into play. More wounds appear on the necromancer's body. As she agonizes, Dallin wants to know if she ordered sacrifices for the immortal demon, or if she had another plan in mind. It was good for her to speak quickly because he still had the patience to listen to her. Her cannibalism was just a degenerate pastime, definitely a lunatic. Lucia yells at him, saying they still have problems. They went down to the basement and found people tied up. Upon finding them, people told them more things. The immortal demon had already broken free from its seal. Hearing this, he ordered her to rest because they would leave in the morning. He needs to step out for a bit, and Lucia wants to know where the mercenary is going. Without hesitation, he says he is going to capture the immortal demon. She doesn't understand what he said because it is very risky and the demon cannot die. Faced with this, she wants to accompany him on this mission. However, he asks her not to worry about him because he has a plan. Besides, Dallin didn't mention anything about killing him. With the corrupted relic in hand, he repeated that he was going to capture him. 300 years ago, an entity ravaged the world with fear and destruction. This is the immortal demon who was fought by the sacred knights. However, their efforts were in vain due to his immortality. What they could do in the face of calamity was to use divine power to seal him. That's what the game said, and the cave he's heading to is the place where the demon was sealed. At the entrance of the cave, cultists are gathering to commit atrocities. One of them complains about the slow pace. One person asks for permission from the pagan priest. However, he orders them not to delay anymore and to enter the cave immediately. The young man wants to spare his daughter and have her sent back. Slapping the young man, the priest says none of them are in a position to ask for anything, and that this arrogant one would be more useful dead. As he prepares to strike the man, saying the same will be done to his daughter, a furious axe flies toward the cowardly clown. Before he could continue oppressing that family, his head became the new home for the axe. With one clown down, the others want to know who did it, because as soon as they caught him, he would be destroyed. Dallin was already stepping forward to claim responsibility. Another fool is now under attack. One tries to warn that there are enemies, but his throat receives a fatal cut. Dallin continues to use his dagger to slice through the fools. The family watches the violence unfold as the cultists scream in pain and horror. After the action ends, he thanks the mercenary. However, one of the corpse's eyes opens mysteriously. Their bodies begin to rise from the ground. That is the work of one of them, who is also a necromancer. Dallin wants to know where this clown came from since he hadn't seen him before. The necromancer orders the bodies to attack the mercenary. With little patience, Dallin uses his combat skills to finish them off. Stiffen, the bodies are flying through the air like crash test dummies. There wasn't much the necromancer could do now. Dallin threw his dagger at him. It ended up piercing the clown's leg. This made him flee deeper into the cave, and Dallin preferred to follow him to his base rather than finish him off immediately. As he walked, a system sound echoed in his ears. His combat skill was just 1% away from reaching the maximum level. Opening the status window, he saw that his skill proficiency was at 99%. Now he can't wait to see what will change when it reaches 100. One of the demon's hands is still chained. He says those with desires are truly a delicacy. The priest tells the demon to enjoy calmly because more sacrifices will soon arrive. Soon, he will have his full power restored. The necromancer had arrived and says it's an emergency because there's an intruder in the cave. The cultists say he shouldn't have interrupted the ritual. He finally says that a man appeared, killed his companions, and freed the people who were to be sacrificed. The demon scolds them for being unable to deal with a single human. He can't believe he's relying on insects like them. Then he started devouring them instead of the sacrifices they had lost. Blood sprays all over the place. That strong demonic energy was a delicacy for him, and Dallin thanks him for doing his job. This way, he didn't need to finish off the cultists. Looking at him, the demon realizes that this is the one who attacked his cave. He sees that there is a sacred sword on his back, but this man is not a sacred knight. Either way, it doesn't matter anymore. Breaking his chains, he says Dallin should consider this an honor, because he's about to witness the power of the immortal demon. Faced with this, the sacred sword begins to glow with blue lightning. In a single movement, he defends against the attack. The demon is impressed that this human is capable of using territory. Now he's going to show him something special, and Dallin remains focused. The curse of the death mist, which melts everything it touches. Even so, the more he observes Dallin, the more impressed he becomes. Dallin used his ability to prevent curses. The demon doesn't know how the human uses an elven seal, but that only works against minor curses. Now Dallin realizes he's in trouble, and one of the demon's tentacles hits him hard. Thinking he had incapacitated him, the demon wants to know what the mercenary will do, since he had dropped the sacred sword. Thanks to his regeneration, he gets back up and wishes he had a barrier to protect him from the curse. The demon says he will curse him until he dies, while Dallin thinks of a more powerful barrier. Then he used his combat skill again. That made something sudden happen. His proficiency had reached 100%, and the skill could now be used with territory. The mercenary paused for a moment. The demon wants to know if he had given up on fighting. The combat skill involves wearing armor, and he thinks of using territory as if it were his armor. Waiting for a reaction, the demon says he's bored, and decided he would burn him until only his bones remained. A massive beam of flames heads toward him, but Dallin doesn't even react. Flames really are a good idea. He's going to create his own armor. Using the power of territory, concentrating his mana, Dallin begins to emit a bluish glow. Chanting a spell, a huge explosion of fire erupts. The one watching in disbelief is the immortal demon. That new appearance of his is something the demon has never seen before, and he doesn't know how it happened. Dallin wants to know if the demon is done being impressed, because if it's over, it's time to get ready for a beating he won't be able to endure. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.